Hi guys, and welcome to History for Calm Nights. Tonight we step barefoot onto a frozen threshold somewhere in Europe, centuries before radiators hum and thermostats glow reassuringly in the dark. You push open a wooden door and the air bites your cheeks with the sharp politeness of winter. The sky outside is already a deep iron blue, and inside the house feels only slightly less cold. You probably would not survive this without complaining at least once about your central heating bill. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you are in the world and what time it is there. I love imagining this quiet circle of listeners stretched across continents, all easing into rest together. Now dim the lights. You stand just inside the doorway, stamping snow from your boots. The floor beneath you is packed earth or rough stone, and it holds the memory of cold like a grudge. The smell of wood smoke hangs in the air, faint but persistent, a sign that the hearth has been alive today, even if only for a few precious hours. Winter in pre-modern Europe is not a season you endure casually. It is a presence, a personality, sometimes an adversary. Across much of Europe, especially during the Little Ice Age, which spanned roughly from the 14th to the 19th century winters, were notably harsher than many people experience today. That is a widely recognised historical reality. Rivers froze solid, harvests failed, snow lingered longer than anyone wished. When you think about families preparing for sleep in such conditions, you begin to understand that bedtime was less about drifting off peacefully and more about strategic survival. You glance toward the hearth, the heart of the room. Its embers glow faintly, casting a low orange shimmer across the walls. There is no central heating humming discreetly behind plaster. Heat is local, stubborn, and temporary. Once the fire dies down, the cold returns with quiet authority. Families know this, you know this, so the entire evening has already been shaped by that awareness. The windows, if they are glass at all, are small. In many rural homes, they are covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. Glass is expensive, and even when present, it does little to keep out the chill. You run your fingers along the edge of a shutter and feel a thin draft slip through, almost playful. That draft will matter later when the fire is nothing but ash. It might surprise you to learn that in some regions people deliberately move their sleeping spaces closer to the hearth during the deepest winter months. Beds were not always fixed pieces of furniture in separate rooms. In modest households, everything happened in one shared space. Cooking, eating, mending, storytelling, and sleeping all unfolded within reach of that single source of warmth. You look at the bed prepared for the night. It is not a minimalist modern frame. It is sturdy, often wooden, sometimes carved if the family can afford ornament. The mattress is thick but uneven, stuffed with straw feathers or wool. You press your palm into it and feel the subtle crunch of its contents shifting. There is no illusion of orthopedic support. Comfort is measured in degrees of insulation rather than spinal alignment. A quirky little detail drifts into your mind. In some colder regions, people believed that sleeping too warmly could make you vulnerable to illness because it weakened the body. So they sometimes balanced warmth with what they considered healthy exposure to cool air. The logic may not pass modern medical scrutiny, but it shows how deeply people thought about the relationship between temperature and health. You sit at the edge of the bed and listen. Outside, the wind slides along the walls, probing for weakness. Inside, the house creaks softly as the timber contracts in the cold. Every sound feels amplified by winter silence. Even your own breathing seems louder. Families do not approach this night unprepared. All day wood has been gathered or peat cut and stacked. Fuel is currency in winter. You cannot simply turn a dial. Every log burned tonight is one less log for tomorrow. There is always calculation in the background. How much do you burn now? How much do you save for February when stores are lowest and spirits thinner? Historians still argue whether ordinary households in certain regions slept in shifts during the longest nights, embracing what some call segmented sleep. There is evidence suggesting that people often woke in the middle of the night for quiet activity, prayer, or conversation before returning to rest. If that is true, winter nights may have felt less like a single stretch of darkness and more like a slow tide that ebbed and flowed. You imagine lying down, fully clothed or nearly so. Nightwear in many European households is simple, often just a long linen shirt. In colder climates, you might keep on woolen stockings or even a cap. The idea of sleeping naked in such temperatures would seem reckless. Your body heat is precious. There is another practical truth. Families often shared beds not merely out of affection but necessity. Body heat multiplies when gathered together. Children curl close to parents, siblings press shoulder to shoulder. Even in wealthier homes where separate beds exist, servants might sleep several to a room. Warmth is communal. Privacy is a luxury that winter gently sets aside. You stretch out under heavy blankets. They are layered thickly, sometimes 2 or 3 quilts deep. The weight of them is reassuring, like being held down against the urge to shiver. You pull them up to your chin and feel your breath warm the small pocket of air beneath the covers. Outside, frost begins to lace the edges of the window. Inside, the last of the fire collapses into glowing red. You know that by morning the room will be colder than it is now. In some houses it is not unusual to wake and see a thin film of ice forming on the inside of the walls. That detail sounds dramatic, but accounts from various European regions describe exactly that phenomenon during particularly brutal winters. And yet there is resilience here. You feel it in the careful preparation of bedding and the way the house is oriented away from prevailing winds in the thick thatch or layered stone designed to buffer extremes. These families are not naive about winter. They anticipate it. They plan for it months in advance, preserving food, mending blankets, checking shutters. As you settle into the mattress, you become acutely aware of your own warmth, the steady rhythm of your heartbeat beneath layers of cloth. The room may be cold, but beneath the blankets there is a fragile pocket of comfort. It is not luxury. It is enough. Your eyelids grow heavier. The wind outside softens to a low murmur. The cold does not disappear, but it retreats slightly, held at bay by wood wool and human closeness. This is how the night begins, not with effortless coziness, but with quiet determination. We'll rise before dawn to coax it back to we'll rise before dawn to coax it back to life. But for now, you drift towards sleep, trusting that the walls, the blankets, and the shared warmth will carry you through until morning. You wake before you mean to. The room is not fully dark, yet it is far from light. A thin greyness presses against the shutter, hinting at snow beyond it. The air inside the house has cooled noticeably. Your nose feels the difference first, then your fingertips. The fire that glowed last night is now a shallow bed of ash, faintly warm if you lean close enough. You sit up slowly, blankets falling from your shoulders in a small cascade of cold. Instantly you regret it. The space beyond the covers feels raw and alert. This is the rhythm of winter mornings before central heating. The house does not wake gradually with you. It remains indifferent until you coax it into warmth. You shuffle toward the hearth, feet searching for familiar spots on the floorboards that creak less than others. The smell of yesterday's smoke lingers woven into the walls and beams. It is a scent that never truly leaves during winter. It clings to clothing, to hair, even to the blankets. In a way, it becomes the season's perfume. The hearth is not just a fireplace, it is the axis of the home. A widely accepted historical understanding tells us that in many European households, especially in rural regions, the open hearth served as kitchen heater and gathering place all at once. Meals are cooked here, water is heated here, stories are told here, and at night whatever warmth it offers is stretched as far as possible. You kneel and stir the ashes gently with an iron poker. Beneath the grey powder a faint red pulse flickers. You smile at that small survival. It means you will not have to begin entirely from scratch. You add kindling, thin sticks collected and dried with care. There is always a moment of suspense. Will it catch? Will the flame bloom again, or will it sulk and die? When the first flame licks upward, it feels like a private victory. You hold your hands toward it, palms open, watching as the skin tingles and colour returns. The warmth is localised, intimate. If you step back 2 paces, it is gone. That is the nature of pre-modern heat. It radiates in a narrow circle, and you must choose to remain within it. There is a practical fact woven into this scene. In many parts of Europe, particularly in medieval and early modern homes, chimneys were a later innovation. Earlier hearths often vented smoke through a simple hole in the roof or through loosely fitted thatch. This meant that the room could be smoky and dim, especially when the wind shifted. Over time, as chimney technology improved, interiors became somewhat less suffocating, but heat still escaped upward with frustrating efficiency. You cough lightly as a small puff of smoke curls back into the room. It stings your eyes just enough to remind you that comfort is relative. And yet there is a reason families cluster here every evening. Even a modest fire transforms the space. Shadows soften, fingers thaw. The psychological effect is as important as the physical one. Up enthusiastically. Instead, there is a up enthusiastically. Instead, there is a slow migration toward the hearth. Children stumble forward, hair-tangled cheeks flushed from sleep. They hold their hands out just as you did, silent and hopeful. It may surprise you to learn that some households bank their fires at night by covering embers with ash to preserve a small core of heat until morning. This simple practice saved fuel and effort. Without it, you would need to strike flint and steel again, and that is not always a quick task when fingers are numb. There is also a curious tidbit that drifts through local lore. In certain regions, people believe that a fire left completely extinguished overnight invited misfortune into the home. Keeping at least a tiny ember alive was not just practical but symbolic. The hearth represented continuity protection, even prosperity. Historians continue to debate whether the centrality of the hearth shaped family dynamics in ways we can fully understand today. Did constant proximity foster stronger bonds, or did it intensify tensions during long winters? The records offer glimpses but not full clarity. What is certain is that the hearth dictated daily movement. It organized space and time. You notice how furniture seems arranged around it almost instinctively. Benches, stools, even the table are positioned to capture warmth. The rest of the room feels peripheral, a cold halo around the bright core. In wealthier homes, separate rooms might exist, but even there, the grand hall or main chamber with its fireplace remains the true centre of life during winter. The fire grows stronger now. You add a thicker log, listening to the crackle as sap within the wood expands and pops. The sound is comforting rhythmic. Outside wind scrapes along the walls, but inside the hearth pushes back. You reflect on how different this feels from modern heating systems. Today, warmth seeps invisibly through vents or pipes evenly distributed and largely unnoticed. Here, warmth is visible, audible, almost alive. You feed it, you tend it, you rely on it as one might rely on a temperamental but loyal companion. In some regions, peat rather than wood fuels the fire. Peat burns slowly and steadily with a distinctive earthy smell. It stains the air differently, heavier, almost sweet. In places where forests are scarce, peat is precious. Its slow burn can mean the difference between a tolerable night and a punishing one. You sit close enough that your knees feel almost too warm while your back remains cool. This unevenness is a constant theme. You rotate occasionally like bread before a flame, ensuring that no single side of you grows stiff with cold. There is an understated elegance in this routine. It is not glamorous, it is not effortless. But it is deliberate. Families measure out their comfort log by log, ember by ember. They understand the arithmetic of winter better than any thermostat could. As the room gradually warms, the day begins to unfold. Porridge simmers over the same fire that will later dry wet gloves, and by evening once again guard the first hours of sleep. The hearth does not rest. It anchors the household from dawn until deep night, and as you lean back, slightly feeling the steady heat against your palms, you recognize that this circle of flame will govern your rest once more. When darkness returns, you will draw closer again, positioning bed and body in relation to its glow. The story of winter sleep in Europe always circles back to this point, this patient fire at the centre of everything. By evening, the fire has done its quiet work. The room no longer feels like a stone cellar, but something almost hospitable. Almost. You watch the light shift along the walls as dusk settles in, and you begin preparing the bed with the same attention you gave the hearth this morning. Because in this world, a bed is not merely furniture. It is architecture within architecture, a fortress built nightly against the cold. You approach it with purpose. The frame is heavy wood, sometimes oak, sometimes pine, depending on region and wealth. In medieval and early modern Europe, a proper bed could be one of the most expensive items in a household. That is a well-documented historical fact. Wills often listed beds and bedding separately as prized possessions. A good bed meant security, status, and survival. You lift the top of a blanket and examine the layers beneath. There is the mattress itself, thick and uneven. Straw mattresses are common among ordinary families. The straw must be replaced periodically, shaken and fluffed to avoid compacting into a lumpy mat. Wealthier households might enjoy feather beds, soft and enveloping, though feathers require maintenance to stay evenly distributed. You press your hand into the surface and feel resistance, not plushness. The real strategy lies in layering. First a linen sheet, cool at the start, but quick to warm with your body heat. Then one or two wool blankets, dense and slightly scratchy against bare skin. Wool is invaluable in winter because it traps air, and trapped air becomes warmth. Finally, perhaps a quilt stitched carefully by hand, thick with the batting and memory. You smooth each layer with care. It is not vanity. It is insulation management. There is a small, almost humorous detail that floats up from the past. In some regions, people believed that shaking the bed vigorously before sleep drove away not only dust but malicious spirits. Whether this was symbolic or sincere, it conveniently also redistributed the filling and trapped a bit more air between layers. Practical magic, you might call it. You sit on the edge and consider the structure rising around you. In many parts of Europe, especially from the late medieval period onward, Beds were built with high wooden frames and heavy curtains. These were not decorative whims, they were barriers against drafts. Drawing the curtains around the bed created a smaller pocket of air that could be warmed more efficiently by your own body. You imagine closing those curtains now, the outside world shrinks instantly. The room's dim glow becomes muted, filtered through fabric. The air inside this enclosure grows still. Even your breathing sounds softer. It is as though you have stepped into a private tent within a larger, colder landscape. Conserved heat brilliantly, you slide into such a structure in your mind and pull the small door shut. It feels snug, almost ship-like. For a moment you forget how cold the wider room may become overnight. Scholars have long discussed whether these enclosed beds also served social purposes beyond warmth. Did they provide rare privacy in crowded homes, or were they purely functional? The evidence is suggestive but not definitive. What is clear is that families invested effort in crafting sleeping spaces that held warmth close. You lower yourself beneath the blankets. The first touch is always brisk. Linen against skin feels cool, even unfriendly. You resist the urge to recoil. Within minutes your body begins to change the microclimate. Heat radiates outward, captured by wool and quilt. The space beneath the covers transforms from chilly to bearable, then from bearable to comforting. There is an art to positioning. You curl slightly, minimizing exposed surface area. You tuck your chin down. In especially cold regions, people sometimes slept wearing caps to prevent heat loss from the head. It may look quaint in paintings, but it makes practical sense when the room temperature drops near freezing. You hear others settling nearby. In many households, multiple beds share the same room. The sound of rustling blankets, a quiet cough, the low murmur of a final exchange. The shared space feels intimate but not intrusive. Winter compresses everyone inward. A curious practice from certain regions involved placing a board or even a woven screen between the bed and the outer wall to block drafts. It was an extra precaution, a small buffer zone between sleeping bodies and frozen stone. You imagine reaching back and feeling that barrier, grateful for the thoughtfulness behind it. There is also the matter of elevation. Beds are raised off the ground for good reason. Cold air sinks. Sleeping directly on the floor would mean surrendering to the coldest layer of the room. Even a modest wooden frame provides separation from that creeping chill. It is a simple but significant defense. As you lie still, you become aware of the quiet within your curtained space. Outside the fabric, the room shifts subtly as the fire settles into embers again. The temperature begins its slow descent, but inside your layered shelter warmth holds. A lingering question occupies some historians. To what extent did these sleeping arrangements shape people's perception of comfort? When warmth is localized and hard-won, perhaps gratitude feels sharper, or perhaps discomfort simply becomes normal. We can only infer from scattered letters and household accounts. You breathe deeply, catching the faint scent of wool and smoke that clings to everything in winter. It is not unpleasant, it is familiar. It signals safety. The world outside may be ice and wind, but here in this wooden cocoon there is a measure of control. You shift slightly, careful not to let cold air rush in too abruptly. Every movement must be considered. You learn to adjust slowly, preserving the warmth you have cultivated. The bed with its layers and curtains becomes your nightly stronghold. Not luxurious, not indulgent, but ingeniously designed for a single purpose. To hold on to the heat your body generates and guard it until dawn. And as your eyes grow heavier, you feel the subtle difference between lying in a cold room and lying within a carefully constructed refuge. The fortress holds. Outside winter presses patiently against walls and shutters. Inside, beneath wool and quilt, you drift towards sleep, once more wrapped in the quiet engineering of centuries past. The night deepens, and you become aware that you are not alone in this carefully built refuge. Even within your curtained bed or sturdy wooden frame, the presence of others shapes the warmth around you. A shared room breathes differently than a solitary one. The air carries layered rhythms, quiet sighs, the soft rustle of someone turning over beneath thick quilts. You glance across the dim interior before closing your eyes. In many European households before the 19th century, it was entirely ordinary for entire families to sleep in a single room. That is a firmly grounded historical reality. Separate bedrooms, especially for children, were far more common among the wealthy than among farmers, labourers, or artisans. For most, winter erased the idea of private space and replaced it with something more practical. Proximity. You shift slightly and feel the subtle transfer of warmth from the person beside you. Body heat is not abstract here. It is tangible, almost measurable. When shoulders touch beneath layers of wool, the temperature rises. When someone pulls away, even a little, you sense the difference instantly. Children often sleep closest to parents not merely for comfort, but for survival. Their smaller bodies lose heat more quickly. You imagine a child's cold feet pressing against your legs, seeking warmth, without even waking fully. You instinctively make room. There is no irritation in the gesture. It is understood. An intriguing detail from certain regions of Northern Europe reveals that some families deliberately arranged sleeping positions by age and size, placing the strongest adults at the outer edges of shared beds to shield younger or frailer members from drafts. It was a subtle choreography rarely written down but remembered in local tradition. You picture this quiet formation like a human wall against winter. The room itself amplifies the sense of togetherness. The ceiling is low, perhaps intentionally so. Smaller spaces are easier to warm, thick beams overhead trap smoke and heat in equal measure. The air feels heavy but not entirely unpleasant. It holds the warmth you have worked so carefully to gather. You notice how sounds carry differently in winter. With windows shuttered and wind pressing against the walls, interior noises feel amplified. A whisper seems to hover longer. A cough echoes softly before dissolving. In such conditions, silence is rarely complete. It is textured with the presence of others. Researchers have long examined how communal sleeping influenced family bonds, though opinions vary widely. Some suggest it fostered closeness and cooperation. Others propose that constant proximity could intensify tensions during long dark months. The surviving records offer glimpses, but no unanimous answer. What you do know lying here is that warmth shared is warmth multiplied. There is also the practical matter of space. Furniture is limited. In many modest homes, the main room serves every purpose. By night, stools are pushed aside, benches repurposed, and pallets unrolled. You may find yourself sleeping on a trundle bed pulled from beneath a larger frame, the simple mechanism sliding smoothly over worn boards. The arrangement is temporary but effective. You adjust your blanket and feel the brush of coarse wool against your cheek. Across the room, someone murmurs in their sleep. The sound is reassuring rather than disruptive. In a world without central heating, companionship itself becomes insulation. Loneliness might feel colder than the air. A lesser-known anecdote from parts of rural France describes families who believed that sleeping alone during severe winter nights invited illness, as the body's warmth could not sustain itself properly without support. Whether rooted in medical observation or communal habit, the practice of shared sleep persisted for generations. You consider how modern sensibilities might interpret this closeness. Privacy is prized in our bedrooms, personalized and distinct. Yet here in this shared chamber there is an unspoken rhythm. You learn to move carefully, so as not to release too much cold air into the collective cocoon. You learn to breathe steadily, contributing to the warmth rather than disturbing it. A faint crackle from the hearth reminds you that the fire is still alive, though diminished. Its glow reaches only so far. Beyond that circle of light, shadows gather in corners. You are grateful for the physical presence beside you, for the certainty that if the room grows colder before dawn, you will not face it alone. There are accounts from early modern England suggesting that servants often shared beds, sometimes 3 or 4 to a mattress, particularly in large households where space was allocated according to rank. Comfort was relative to status. The arrangement may sound cramped, but it was accepted as normal, especially in winter when every shared breath contributed to survival. You pull the curtain of your bed slightly tighter, sealing in the warmth generated not only by your own body but by those nearby. The space feels denser now, insulated by layers of fabric and flesh alike. Some historians continue to question how perceptions of modesty evolved alongside these sleeping patterns. Did the communal nature of rest alter social norms around privacy? The debate persists, woven through studies of domestic life. But as you lie here, those abstract questions dissolve into something simpler. You are warm enough. That is what matters. Your eyes grow heavier. The subtle rise and fall of another's breathing becomes a lullaby of sorts. Outside, the wind scrapes faintly along the shutters, searching for entry. Inside, warmth accumulates in shared pockets beneath layered quilts. You realize that winter, sleep in this era, is never solitary. It is collaborative. Each person contributes heat presence and vigilance. In the darkest months, survival is rarely an individual achievement. It is communal, woven quietly into the fabric of nightly rest. And so you drift deeper into sleep, aware that the warmth pressing gently against your side is both practical and profoundly human. The room may be cold at its edges, but at its center, where bodies gather and blankets overlap, there is a steady glow that no draught can easily extinguish. Somewhere in the depth of night you stir again, not because of the cold this time, but because of a faint rustling beneath you. It is subtle, almost like dry grass shifting in a distant field. You pause, half awake, listening. Then you remember what lies inside the mattress itself. You press your palm down and feel the gentle resistance of straw packed into ticking fabric. In many European homes across the centuries, mattresses were filled with whatever insulating material was locally available. That is a well-established historical reality. Straw was common among rural families. In wealthier households, feathers were prized for their softness and warmth. In colder regions, wool or even dried seaweed sometimes made an appearance. You shift your weight, and the filling responds with a faint crunch. It is not unpleasant, just present. The mattress is alive in its own way, responsive to movement reshaping itself around your body. Comfort here is dynamic rather than fixed. There is something almost endearing about the effort required to maintain such bedding. Straw mattresses had to be aired out regularly. Families would carry them outside on clear days, beating and fluffing them to restore volume. Feathers needed shaking to prevent clumping. Wool required careful cleaning to avoid dampness settling in. Every component of the bed demanded attention. A small and curious detail from household records in parts of Germany mentions that fresh straw was often replaced around major feast days, not only for cleanliness but as a symbolic renewal of the household. Imagine the scent of new straw filling the room, sharp and earthy, mingling with winter smoke. You become aware of another reality beneath the blankets. In an era before modern pest control bedding could harbour uninvited guests, fleas and lice were common companions in many households, especially during colder months when washing and drying fabrics became more difficult. It is not the most glamorous detail, but it is honest. There are anecdotes from medieval travellers who joked that they preferred the chill of the road to the lively company of an inn mattress. That wry observation hints at a broader truth. Cleanliness standards differed and the battle against insects was ongoing. Historians continue to explore how people understood these tiny cohabitants. Some believed that a certain level of infestation was inevitable, even natural. Others experimented with herbal remedies, tucking sprigs of lavender or rosemary into bed in hopes of deterring pests. Whether these measures were fully effective remains uncertain. But the effort reveals both ingenuity and persistence. You brush your hand lightly across the sheet, feeling the weave of linen beneath your fingers. Linen made from flax was widely used across Europe for bedding because it was breathable and relatively durable. It felt cool at first touch, then warmed gradually with contact. That cooling effect in summer became a gentle blessing. In winter, it required patience. There is a quiet intimacy in knowing the composition of your bed so thoroughly. You know how the straw shifts. You know where the mattress dips slightly from years of use. You know the faint scent of wool that rises when blankets are lifted. It is not uniform or factory perfect. It is personal. In parts of Scandinavia, some households layered reindeer hides atop mattresses for added insulation during the harshest months. The fur trapped air efficiently creating a surprisingly warm surface. You imagine running your hand across such a hide, feeling the dense softness beneath your palm. You turn slightly mindful not to let too much cold air seep under the covers. The mattress responds again, settling around your hips and shoulders. It is not engineered for spinal alignment, but it cradles you in its own imperfect way. There is also the matter of scent. Bedding absorbs the atmosphere of the room. Smoke from the hearth lingers in fibres. The faint aroma of peat or wood blends with the natural smell of straw and wool. Over time, these scents become familiar markers of home. They signal continuity even in the depths of winter. Some scholars have wondered how these layered sensory experiences shaped people's emotional connection to their homes. When bedding carried the literal imprint of daily life, perhaps attachment deepened. The debate is ongoing, but lying here you sense that your bed is not merely a sleeping surface. It is an archive of seasons. You adjust the quilt slightly higher under your chin. Beneath it, your body heat accumulates, warming the layers closest to you. The straw beneath may not generate warmth, but it insulates by holding pockets of air. That simple principle makes all the difference. In certain rural communities, families would periodically flip mattresses to distribute wear and prevent dampness from settling in one area. Damp was a constant concern in winter. A mattress that retained moisture could chill the body dangerously overnight. Vigilance was part of survival. You imagine a clear winter morning when bedding is dragged outside, laid across fences or snow-crusted grass to air in the pale sun. The sight would be striking. White linens against white snow, steam rising faintly as moisture evaporates. A domestic ritual framed by frost. As you sink deeper into the mattress, as now, the earlier rustling fades into background texture. Your body has moulded the straw slightly, creating a shallow hollow of warmth. It's not luxury, but it is effective. The knowledge that this bed was assembled by hand, stuffed and stitched locally adds a quiet dignity to the experience. There is no distant factory, no anonymous production line. Each component reflects the landscape around you. You breathe in slowly, catching that familiar blend of linen and smoke once more. The room beyond the blankets may cool steadily as embers dim, but beneath these layered materials warmth holds. You settle again, reassured by the simple ingenuity of straw feathers and wool working together. Even in a world without radiators or vents, comfort emerges from humble materials shaped by patient hands. And as your thoughts drift, you realize that winter sleep is not defined by softness alone. It is defined by resourcefulness, by the quiet rustle of straw beneath you and the steady accumulation of warmth above. You wake briefly when the wind changes direction. It slips along the outer wall and finds some narrow seam in the timber. Even with blankets tucked tight, you sense a faint ribbon of cool air brushing your cheek. It is subtle, but in winter subtlety matters. You open your eyes and see the dim outline of the bed's wooden frame rising around you. This is not just a platform with 4 legs. In many European homes from the late medieval period onward, beds were constructed with tall posts and heavy hangings for a reason. They were microclimates. Small rooms within larger, colder rooms. You reach up and adjust the curtain that hangs from the canopy above. The fabric is thick, perhaps wool lined with linen, maybe even embroidered if the household can afford such detail. When you draw it fully closed, the world outside your bed dims further. The air within feels more contained, less restless. This design was not merely decorative. In grand manor houses and even modest farm dwellings, bed curtains served as insulation against drafts and wandering cold. That is a broadly acknowledged historical fact. The thick textiles trapped a layer of air around the sleeper, allowing body heat to accumulate more effectively than it would in an open room. You lie back and listen to how the sound changes. Outside the curtain, someone shifts on a bench. The hearth settles with a faint sigh, but within this enclosed space noises are softened, as if filtered through layers of fabric and sleep. In some regions of France and Scotland, fully enclosed box beds became common. These were built directly into the wall, complete with small doors that could be latched at night. You imagined sliding such a door closed now. The sensation would be surprisingly cozy, almost like being tucked into a cabinet lined with blankets. There is something deeply practical about reducing the volume of space you must heat. If the entire room remains cold, at least this smaller compartment can be warmed by your own breath and skin. It is a simple principle of physics applied with carpentry and cloth. A lesser-known curiosity emerges from certain rural traditions. In parts of Brittany, families sometimes decorated the exterior panels of box beds with painted motifs, turning these functional structures into small works of art. Even in harsh climates, aesthetic expression found a way into domestic life. You notice how the air inside your curtained bed grows slightly humid from your breathing. It fogs faintly against the inner surface of the fabric. That moisture, though subtle, helps retain warmth. Outside the room, temperature may be dropping steadily as the fire dwindles. Inside, your personal climate holds steady a little longer. Some historians have questioned whether these enclosed beds contributed to concerns about air quality and health. Did the stillness of the air pose risks? The evidence is mixed. While ventilation was limited, the trade-off between fresh air and warmth was constantly negotiated. In deep winter, warmth usually won. You shift gently, careful not to disturb the fragile equilibrium of heat beneath the covers. The mattress beneath you gives slightly, responding to the change in weight. Above, the canopy looms like a protective ceiling. In wealthier households, bed hangings could be layered with multiple textiles, including velvet or tapestry. These luxurious materials were not only symbols of status, but also effective barriers against cold drafts. The thick weave absorbed and retained warmth far better than bare stone walls ever could. You imagine running your fingers along such fabric, feeling the dense texture beneath your hand. It would carry the faint scent of smoke and wool, perhaps even a hint of beeswax from nearby candles. Beyond the bed curtains, the room remains a shared space. Shadows pool in corners, the hearth emits a faint red glow, but your enclosed bed feels separate now, a retreat carved out of necessity. An interesting debate continues among domestic historians about how much privacy these structures truly provided. Were they primarily about warmth, or did they also reflect evolving notions of personal space? The answer likely varies by region and social class. For you in this moment, the distinction feels secondary. The warmth is what you notice most. You pull the blanket closer under your chin and listen to your own breathing echo softly within the curtained enclosure. The wind outside seems farther away now, muted by layers of wood and cloth. There is a quiet reassurance in knowing that generations before you perfected this design. They learn through experience how cold travels, how fabric traps air, how a small space can be made tolerable even when the larger room cannot. You consider how different this feels from a modern bedroom heated evenly by hidden pipes. There is no uniform warmth here. Instead, there are zones. The hearth's glow near the centre of the room, the cooler periphery, and within your bed a concentrated pocket of relative comfort. In certain alpine regions, people even added additional fabric panels during the coldest months, doubling the enclosure around their beds. It was an adaptable system adjusted as temperatures shifted. You close your eyes again and feel the faint brush of fabric near your shoulder as you settle. The bed curtains sway slightly with your movement, then fall still. The small space within grows quieter. Outside, winter continues its patient vigil. Frost may creep along the inner wall by morning. The fire may fade entirely before dawn, but within this wooden frame and behind these thick hangings your warmth lingers. You drift deeper into sleep, wrapped not only in blankets but in centuries of domestic ingenuity. The bed with its curtains and canopy stands as a testament to the quiet determination of families who refuse to surrender comfort entirely to the cold. And as the night stretches on, you remain enclosed in this small chamber of warmth, a human solution to an indifferent winter. You wake again just before dawn, not fully just enough to notice the cool air brushing the tip of your nose. Instinctively, you burrow deeper beneath the blankets. Your hand reaches up and feels the soft edge of the cap still resting on your head. It may look quaint in paintings, but the nightcap is no mere accessory. Across much of Europe, men, women and children commonly wore caps to bed during the colder months. That is a straightforward historical fact. Heat escapes easily from the head, and in a room that might drop close to freezing by morning, even a simple linen or wool cap could make a measurable difference. You adjust it slightly and feel the faint warmth trapped beneath. The fabric is soft from repeated washing, perhaps patched in places. It is not elegant, but it is practical. Around you others are similarly bundled. Wool stockings remain on feet. Long linen shirts cover arms and legs. In particularly harsh climates, an extra woolen layer might be added beneath the blankets. Sleepwear in this era is less about comfort in the modern sense and more about insulation strategy. You do not change into something thin and decorative. You change into what preserves heat. You slide your hand beneath the blanket and feel the texture of wool against your fingers. Wool is remarkable. Even when slightly damp from breath or the faint humidity of the room, it continues to insulate. People may not have understood the science in technical terms, but they understood the results. Generations of trial and error taught them what worked. There is a charming and slightly humorous detail recorded in some English households. Children were sometimes scolded for tossing off their caps during sleep as if the garment itself were a guardian against illness. The belief that cold air caused sickness was widespread, and keeping the head covered felt like a sensible defense. You shift your feet and feel the comforting hug of thick stockings. In a modern bedroom, such attire might feel excessive. Here it feels wise. The floor beneath the bed is undoubtedly colder than the air above it. Even with the elevation, the chill lingers near your toes. In certain Scandinavian regions, people sometimes wrapped an extra strip of cloth around their necks before bed to protect against drafts. The idea of sleeping fully exposed to cold air would have seemed reckless. Protection was layered thoughtfully. Some scholars have explored how these practices influenced the evolution of dedicated sleepwear in later centuries. Did the habit of wearing specific garments to bed gradually lead to more specialized designs as heating improved? The discussion continues, but in this moment practicality outweighs fashion. You imagine the tactile sensation of wool against skin. It can be slightly coarse, a gentle reminder of its presence. Yet beneath blankets the scratchiness fades into background comfort. The fabric warms quickly, conforming to your body. Beyond clothing, you are aware of the subtle ritual that precedes sleep each night. Garments worn during the day may be brushed free of snow or soot before being layered appropriately for rest. In some households, outer clothing is hung near the hearth to dry, ensuring that damp fabric does not sap warmth overnight. There is also the matter of breath. In especially cold rooms, you might see a faint cloud form as you exhale. The nightcap and collar of your shirt catch a bit of that warmth, redirecting it downward. It is a small but meaningful advantage. A curious note from parts of rural Italy mentions that older family members sometimes insisted on sleeping with scarves wrapped loosely around their heads and ears, claiming it prevented aching joints. Whether rooted in medical understanding or simple habit, such customs reveal how deeply people associated warmth with health. You turn slightly and feel the layered fabric shift with you. Linen closest to your skin absorbs a trace of moisture, while wool above it holds heat. The combination is deliberate, even if not articulated scientifically at the time. In monasteries and convents where communal dormitories were common, similar practices prevailed. Simple nightshirts and caps were standard issue during winter months. Even in settings devoted to spiritual discipline, the cold was taken seriously. You consider how different this feels from slipping into a centrally heated room where pajamas are chosen for softness rather than survival. Here every thread serves a purpose. The fire beyond your curtained bed has nearly faded. You sense the room's temperature dipping further, yet within your layered cocoon warmth persists. Clothing acts as an additional barrier, reducing the rate at which heat escapes into the surrounding air. Historians have also pondered how these nightly rituals shaped perceptions of vulnerability, when warmth depends on what you wear as much as where you sleep. Perhaps clothing feels less like adornment and more like armor. You tug the blanket slightly higher, ensuring that only your nose remains exfoliated. Even that feels daring in the early morning chill. Around you, the quiet breathing of others continues. Caps peek from beneath blankets. A woolen sleeve drapes over the edge of a mattress. The entire room resembles a cluster of bundled shapes, each carefully insulated against the cold. You close your eyes again, grateful for the simple ingenuity of fabric layered over fabric. In a world without radiators humming behind walls, warmth is portable. It travels with you in the fibers you wrap around your body, and as dawn inches closer and the first faint light filters through shutters, you remain wrapped in wool and linen, cocooned not only by blankets but by centuries of practical wisdom stitched into every thread. By midwinter, you no longer need to be told where the cold will find you. You feel it instinctively. It slips along the floor, first pooling low and quiet. It threads through the tiniest seam in the wall. It waits behind shutters and beneath doors patient as frost. You swing your legs out of bed and the chill climbs instantly through your stockings. Even raised on a wooden frame, the mattress cannot fully escape the temperature of the room. The floor beneath, whether stone flags or packed earth, holds the night's cold like a hidden reservoir. Across much of Europe, before the widespread use of insulated construction houses were built of stone timber or wattle and daub. These materials provided shelter and durability, but they did not seal out winter entirely. That is a well-documented truth. Walls could be thick, yet without modern insulation they absorbed cold as readily as they blocked wind. You cross the room and run your fingers along the inner wall. It feels firm, slightly damp and unyielding. In especially severe winters, frost could form on the interior surface of poorly insulated stone. You imagine tracing delicate ice patterns with your fingertip, each one a reminder that the boundary between inside and outside is thinner than it appears. The windows are another negotiation. Glass, when present, is often small and set in leaded frames. Larger panes are rare and expensive. In rural cottages, shutters are closed tightly at night, sometimes reinforced with cloth or straw stuffed into gaps. Every opening becomes a potential point of weakness. There is an understated ingenuity in the way families improvise against drafts. In some English villages, rolled fabric known as draft excluders was pushed along the base of doors long before the term existed. In parts of Central Europe, families hung thick woolen cloths over doorways between rooms to create warmer inner chambers. You notice how the ceiling slopes slightly downward toward one side of the room. This is not always accidental. Lower ceilings help retain heat. In peasant cottages, rooms were deliberately compact to minimize the volume of air that needed warming. The architecture itself reflects an understanding of thermal reality. An intriguing custom from certain alpine communities involved lining the inside of shutters with straw mats during the coldest months. The extra layer created a small buffer against icy winds. It may look rustic, but it is effective. You kneel near the hearth and feel the contrast. Just a few steps from the outer wall, the air is noticeably warmer. The distribution of heat is uneven, almost theatrical. Close to the fire, cheeks flush and hands thaw. Near the periphery, breath turns faintly visible. Researchers have long considered how such temperature gradients influence daily routines. Did families cluster naturally into the warmer zones, leaving peripheral spaces unused in winter? The evidence suggests they did. Living areas contracted toward the hearth, while outer corners grew quiet and seldom visited until spring. You imagine the subtle choreography this creates. Children gravitate toward the warmest patch of floor. Adults position chairs, carefully rotating occasionally to warm both front and back. Even pets find their place in the thermal hierarchy, curled near the fire or beneath benches. There is also the matter of roofing. Thatched roofs, common in many rural regions, provided some insulation due to their thickness. However, gaps could develop over time, allowing drafts to slip through. Regular maintenance was essential. A neglected roof could turn a tolerable winter into a punishing one. In wealthier urban homes, thicker masonry and multiple rooms offered some advantage. Yet even there, central heating did not exist in the modern sense. Individual fireplaces heated individual rooms. Corridors and staircases often remained uncomfortably cold. You walk toward a corner of the room rarely used at night. The air feels sharper here. You can almost sense the boundary where the hearth's influence fades. It is a reminder that warmth must be pursued actively. A curious observation from certain Scandinavian households notes that families sometimes rearrange furniture, seasonally pulling heavy cupboards or chests against exterior walls during winter to add an extra layer of insulation. The furniture itself became part of the defense. Some historians have explored whether these seasonal adjustments shaped people's sense of space. Did rooms feel smaller in winter because they effectively were smaller functionally compressed toward the center? The discussion continues, but you feel it clearly. The house contracts around the fire. You return to the bed and slide back beneath the covers for a moment, testing how quickly warmth returns. It gathers steadily, slower than when several bodies share the space, but persistent. The walls may not be fully trustworthy. The shutters may rattle, but the layered strategy of fabric furniture and careful positioning compensates. Every household develops its own version of this quiet engineering. You picture a snow-laden night when wind presses hard against the structure. The house creaks softly, beams adjusting to temperature shifts, yet inside candles flicker, blankets hold and families endure. It is not that the cold is conquered, it is negotiated. Drafts are redirected, gaps are stuffed, space is reorganized. Winter becomes a constant conversation between architecture and adaptation. You settle once more aware of the fragile balance maintained by wood cloth and human effort. The outer world may be frozen, but within these walls, warmth is cultivated deliberately inch by inch. And as you close your eyes again, you sense the house around you, imperfect yet resilient, holding back the night with every beam and board. As the night stretches on, you become quietly aware of something almost scientific unfolding beneath your blankets. You may not have the language of thermodynamics, but you feel the principle clearly. Your body is a furnace, a modest one perhaps, but steady, and in a winter without central heating, that steady warmth is precious. You lie curled on your side knees, drawn slightly upward. It is not merely a comfortable position, it reduces the surface area exposed to colder air trapped inside the bed. Instinct guides you. Generations before you have done the same. Human bodies produce heat continuously. That is a simple biological fact. Even at rest, you generate warmth through metabolism. In a modern, evenly heated room, you hardly notice. Here in a chamber where the air may hover just above freezing by dawn, you feel every degree of difference. You press your hands between your thighs for a moment, feeling the concentration of warmth there. You tuck your chin down toward your chest. These small adjustments conserve heat-reducing loss from extremities. No one has handed you a textbook. Experience has taught you. Across the bed, another sleeper shifts closer. The contact is subtle at first. A shoulder brushes yours, then a leg settles along your calf. Immediately the warmth intensifies. Shared body heat accumulates more quickly than solitary warmth ever could. There is a straightforward historical observation that in many European households, bed sharing was common, not only among families but also among unrelated individuals, especially in inns and urban lodgings. The practice sometimes surprises modern readers, but in winter it made practical sense. You feel the difference as soon as two bodies lie side by side. The air trapped between you warms faster. The blankets above capture that combined heat. The mattress beneath absorbs some of it and slowly radiates it back. In certain northern regions, entire families would cluster together under heavy coverings during especially brutal cold spells. It was not unusual for siblings to sleep crosswise or even for children to share space at the foot of a larger bed. The goal was not elegance, it was efficiency. A small but fascinating detail appears in some Alpine communities. During severe storms, families sometimes brought even older children into the parents' bed temporarily to conserve warmth. It was a flexible arrangement shaped by weather rather than rigid rules. You listen to the rhythm of shared breathing. Inhale, exhale. The enclosed bed begins to feel like a small ecosystem warmed by respiration and proximity. The curtains around you trap not only heat but also the faint humidity of breath. The air grows slightly heavier but warmer. Medical understanding of the time did not frame this in terms of calories or heat exchange, yet people recognized the practical benefit. Cold nights were easier to endure when bodies gathered. There is also the matter of extremities. Hands and feet cool quickly. You slide your foot gently against another's ankle, feeling the immediate exchange of warmth. No words are spoken, the gesture is mutual, almost unconscious. Some historians have explored whether this constant physical closeness altered emotional bonds in ways we can only partially grasp. Did shared warmth deepen affection, or was it simply routine? The archival evidence offers glimpses but no definitive answer. What you know in this moment is that heat shared is heat multiplied. You shift slightly aware that too much movement can release the precious warmth trapped beneath the covers. Even turning over requires care. A sudden lift of the blanket invites cold air to rush in, erasing minutes of accumulated heat. The mattress beneath you, filled with straw or feathers, contributes by holding pockets of warmed air. The blankets above act as barriers, slowing the escape of heat into the colder room. It is a layered defense system powered ultimately by your own body. You imagine a night when the temperature outside plunges even lower, when frost creeps thick along shutters and wind moans steadily. In such conditions, the warmth within a shared bed becomes not just comfortable but essential. There is a record from early modern England noting that in some households it was considered prudent for a sick or elderly family member to sleep between two healthier adults during winter to ensure they remained warm through the night. It was a quiet act of care embedded in daily life. You become aware of how your breathing has slowed, deepened. The initial chill of climbing into bed is a distant memory now. The space beneath the blankets feels stable, almost insulated from the wider room. Modern central heating creates uniform warmth without effort. Here, warmth is dynamic, produced and sustained by living bodies. It is a shared resource dependent on closeness and cooperation. You pull the quilt slightly tighter around your shoulders and settle again. The cold beyond the bed remains real, but within this cocoon of layered fabric and shared presence, it loses its sharpest edge. The night continues quietly. The fire in the hearth may be nearly gone. The walls may grow colder by the hour, yet beneath these covers warmth circulates, steadily sustained by heartbeat and breath. And as you drift back towards sleep, you sense the quiet resilience of this arrangement. No pipes hum, no vents whisper, only the soft exchange of body heat in a world where every degree matters. You do not always sleep in a family cottage. Sometimes in this drifting journey through European winters, you find yourself behind thick stone walls where silence feels deeper and the cold more disciplined. You open your eyes to the faint outline of a vaulted ceiling above you. The air smells faintly of wax and old wood. You are in a monastery. The dormitory is long and narrow, lined with simple beds or pallets placed in measured rows. There is no clutter here, no domestic scatter of stools and chests. Everything feels orderly, intentional. Yet the cold is just as present as it was in the cottage, perhaps more so. Stone holds chill with remarkable loyalty. Across much of medieval Europe, monastic communities slept in communal dormitories, particularly in earlier centuries. That is a well-supported historical reality. The rule of St. Benedict, followed by many Western monasteries, prescribed shared sleeping arrangements to encourage discipline and humility. Privacy was secondary to spiritual purpose. You shift beneath a coarse wool blanket. The mattress beneath you is thinner than the one in a peasant home. It may be stuffed with straw, perhaps laid directly on a wooden platform. Comfort is not the priority here. Endurance is. The dormitory is unheated or only minimally warmed. Fires are costly and often reserved for refectories or workrooms. In winter, monks and nuns rely on layered clothing and thick coverings to endure the night. You feel the rough weave of wool against your neck, the faint itch that never quite fades. A bell rings faintly in the distance. It is not dawn yet. It is time for nocturnal prayers. In many monastic traditions, the night was punctuated by services even in the coldest months. You push yourself upright, feeling the sharp bite of air against your face as blankets fall away. There is something almost surreal about stepping barefoot or sandaled onto a stone floor, chilled by hours of darkness. The cold travels instantly upward through your body. You pull your robe tighter, grateful for its heavy fabric. An interesting detail from some Cistercian monasteries suggests that during particularly severe winters, allowances were occasionally made for extra coverings, though official rules often emphasized austerity. The tension between discipline and physical necessity is subtle but real. You glance along the row of beds. Figures rise quietly, their breath faintly visible in the dim light of a lantern. There is no chatter, only the soft rustle of fabric and the distant echo of wind against thick walls. Monasteries were often built with durability in mind, using stone that could withstand centuries, yet that same stone made interiors slow to warm. Once chilled, it radiated cold steadily. Fires, when lit, struggled against the sheer mass of masonry. Some historians have explored whether such conditions were intentionally embraced as a part of spiritual discipline. Did enduring cold foster humility or sharpen devotion? The debate continues. What is clear is that monastic life did not exempt anyone from winter's grip. You step into the chapel where a small fire may burn in a brazier, offering minimal relief. The vaulted space amplifies every sound, chants rise softly echoing against stone. The cold seems to intensify the clarity of voices. After prayers, you return to the dormitory. Sliding back beneath the blanket feels like re-entering a fragile refuge. The mattress has cooled during your absence. You curl slightly, drawing warmth inward once more. Unlike a family bed where shared body heat accumulates quickly, monastic beds may be spaced apart, emphasizing separation. The air between sleepers remains cooler. You must rely more heavily on your own insulation. Yet there is a quiet solidarity here as well. You know that everyone in the dormitory faces the same chill. The shared experience binds you even without physical closeness. A lesser-known note from certain Benedictine houses records that elderly monks were sometimes granted thicker bedding during extreme cold, an acknowledgement that age made endurance more difficult. Compassion found its place even within strict rule. You pull the blankets closer and feel your breath warm the small space near your face. Outside the monastery walls, snow may blanket fields and forests. Inside, discipline and routine continue undisturbed. The absence of central heating is not merely an inconvenience. It shapes daily rhythm. It dictates when you rise, how you dress, how long you linger near a fire when permitted. You close your eyes, again aware that sleep here is lighter, more fragmented by bells and prayer. Yet the body adapts. It finds warmth where it can, even in austere surroundings. As you drift back into shallow rest, the cold remains a constant companion. Not dramatic, not cruel, but persistent. The monastery does not conquer winter. It coexists with it wrapped in wool and stone. And beneath your simple blanket in a dormitory hushed by devotion and frost, you surrender once more to the quiet endurance of a European winter night. The stone walls around you grow taller now, stretching upward into shadow. You are no longer in a modest cottage or austere monastery. You stand within the vast hall of a castle, where banners hang motionless in the cold air and the ceiling disappears into darkness. Wealth surrounds you, but winter does not bow easily to wealth. A large fireplace dominates one end of the great hall. Its opening is wide enough for a person to stand inside. Flames leap higher here than in any peasant hearth. Logs the size of small trunks burn steadily, tended by servants who understand that this fire must not fail. That is a well-established historical fact. In medieval castles, enormous hearths were central features designed to warm communal spaces as effectively as possible. Yet even with such impressive flames, the scale of the room works against you. Heat rises swiftly toward the high rafters, leaving the lower air only moderately warmed. You step closer to the fire and feel its strength against your face while your back remains cool. The imbalance persists. Castles were built for defense and display, not for efficient heating. Thick stone walls provided protection but absorbed cold relentlessly. Narrow windows reduced drafts but limited sunlight. The architecture speaks of power, yet it cannot eliminate winter's presence. As night approaches, servants prepare the Lord's chamber. You follow, moving away from the cavernous hall into a smaller, more contained room. Here the fireplace is modest but sufficient. A bed stands prominently against one wall, raised high on a carved wooden frame. In aristocratic households, beds were often among the most elaborate pieces of furniture. This is widely documented in inventories and estate records. Heavy draperies surround the frame, sometimes lined with fur or thick wool to improve insulation. The bed becomes a symbol of status and a practical shield against drafts at once. You run your fingers along the embroidered curtain. The fabric is dense, rich in colour, perhaps imported from distant regions. Yet beneath its beauty lies purpose. When drawn closed, it traps a pocket of warmer air around the sleeper. An intriguing detail from certain noble households reveals that tapestries hung on stone walls served a dual function. Beyond decoration, they acted as insulation, reducing drafts and softening the chill radiating from masonry. You imagine the heavy textile behind you is woven scenes of hunts and battles, quietly guarding against the cold. Servants bring heated stones wrapped in cloth and place them between the sheets before the Lord retires. This practice, recorded in various regions, provided temporary warmth, taking the edge off icy bedding. You watch as the stones are slipped carefully beneath layers of linen and wool. Some historians have examined whether life in castles felt truly comfortable during winter, or merely less harsh than in simpler dwellings. The evidence suggests that even nobility contended with cold rooms and frosted corridors. Wealth mitigated discomfort but did not erase it. You sit at the edge of the bed and notice how high it stands from the floor. Elevation is deliberate. Cold air settles low, so rising above it offers a modest advantage. Thick rugs cover parts of the floor, adding another layer of insulation. There is a quiet choreography to bedtime here. The fire is stoked generously, curtains are drawn tightly, blankets are layered precisely, even in privilege winter demands preparation. A curious anecdote from the Tudor period describes courtiers complaining about icy bedchambers despite roaring fires in adjacent halls. It seems that no amount of grandeur could fully tame the climate. You slip beneath the covers and feel the fading warmth of the heated stones. It is fleeting but welcome. The linen closest to your skin warms, gradually aided by the thick quilt above. Outside your curtained bed, the chamber remains cooler. Draughts may still find their way beneath doors or through narrow window casements, yet within this enclosed space, warmth gathers more effectively. You listen to the muted sounds of the castle at night. A distant door creaks, footsteps echo faintly along a corridor. The wind hums softly against outer walls. The scale of the building amplifies every sound. Some researchers continue to explore how aristocratic expectations of comfort evolved alongside architectural innovations. Did repeated exposure to cold halls and corridors drive experimentation with new heating methods? The discussion remains open, but incremental changes did emerge over centuries. You pull the heavy curtain fully closed and notice how quickly the small space grows quieter. The air inside feels denser, warmer by degrees. Despite wealth and careful planning, winter still leaves its signature. You may wake to find a thin sheen of frost along the inside of window glass. The fire may burn low by dawn. Servants will rise early to rekindle it before you stir. You close your eyes and consider how even in grandeur sleep depends on layers, proximity to fire and clever use of fabric. The castle offers more resources, but it does not eliminate the essential challenge. The cold outside remains impartial. It presses against stone and timber alike. Yet within your curtained bed, beneath thick quilts and guarded by tapestry-lined walls, you find a pocket of warmth that feels almost luxurious. And as you drift into sleep within these towering walls, you sense that winter, though softened by wealth, still demands respect from everyone beneath its silent sky. You leave the castle's echoing corridors behind and find yourself once more in a smaller dwelling where the ceiling feels close enough to touch and the scent of smoke lingers in every beam. This is a peasant cottage, low and sturdy, crouched against the wind as if it knows winter personally. You stoop slightly as you enter. The doorway is modest, built to conserve heat rather than impress visitors. Inside, the main room serves nearly every function of life. Cooking, mending, eating, and sleeping all unfold within a compact space carefully arranged around the hearth. In many rural regions of Europe, cottages were deliberately constructed with low ceilings and thick walls to reduce heat loss. That is a firmly grounded historical observation. Smaller rooms require less energy to warm, and thick earthen or timber walls slow the advance of cold air. Efficiency is built into the architecture. You move closer to the hearth, which occupies pride of place along one wall. Its glow is modest compared to a castle fireplace, but in this smaller room it feels more effective. Heat radiates outward, reaching benches and the rough wooden table with reassuring steadiness. The walls may be made of wattle and daub timber, frames filled with a mixture of mud, straw and clay. This combination offers some insulation, especially when well maintained. You run your hand lightly along the surface and feel its textured firmness. There is an understated cleverness in the way these cottages are arranged. Storage chests often line the outer walls, adding an extra barrier between sleeping bodies and the cold. In some regions, beds are positioned in the warmest corner of the room, angled away from prevailing winds. A lesser-known custom from parts of rural Poland involved placing a small icon or religious image above the bed during winter, believed to guard not only the soul but also the household's well-being through the harsh season. Whether symbolic or sincere, such gestures reveal how survival and belief intertwined. You notice how compact everything feels. There is little wasted space. Even the loft above, where grain or tools might be stored, contributes to insulation by trapping a layer of air between roof and living area. Some historians have explored whether the intimacy of such tight quarters fostered stronger family cohesion during long winters. Others suggest that confinement could strain tempers. The written record offers hints in diaries and court documents, but no single conclusion. What you sense immediately is that closeness is unavoidable. You sit on a bench near the hearth and observe the careful management of fuel. Wood is stacked neatly, each piece measured against the length of night. In regions where forests were scarce, peat or dried dung might supplement the fire. Resourcefulness shapes every decision. An intriguing detail from certain alpine villages describes families who hung thick woolen cloaks along interior walls during winter, effectively turning garments into temporary insulation. The room would appear lined with coats, transforming clothing into architecture. As evening deepens, bedding is prepared in the corner closest to the hearth. Perhaps a simple wooden frame supports a straw mattress. Perhaps pallets are unrolled directly on the floor layered with blankets. The floor itself, whether packed earth or stone, retains the chill of night. In some cottages, fresh rushes were spread periodically across the ground, adding a modest layer of comfort and warmth. The scent of dried grasses mingles with smoke and wool. You kneel to adjust a blanket and feel the quiet satisfaction of arranging layers precisely. Every fold matters. Every gap sealed against draught contributes to the fragile warmth you will rely on until morning. Scholars continue to consider how regional variations in building materials influenced winter comfort. Stone cottages in Scotland differed from timber dwellings in Scandinavia or adobe structures in southern Europe. Yet across these differences a shared principle emerges. Conserve heat, minimize space, stay close. You lie down near the hearth, aware that as embers fade, the room's temperature will fall steadily. The proximities to fire buys you only a few extra degrees, but those degrees matter. Out to side, wind brushes against the thatch. The roof creaks softly as beams adjust to cooling air. Inside the low ceiling traps warmth, briefly creating a pocket of relative comfort. You listen to the faint crackle of burning wood and the muted murmur of family members settling into sleep. In this small cottage, winter feels both intimate and immediate. There is no grandeur to buffer it, no vast hall to absorb its chill. Instead, there is careful design and daily vigilance. A modest home such as this does not conquer the season. It negotiates with it inch by inch. Every structural choice from low rafters to thick walls reflects a quiet understanding of climate. You pull the blanket higher and feel its reassuring weight. The mattress beneath may rustle softly with straw, but it insulates effectively enough. The hearth glows faintly, casting flickers of orange across the ceiling. As your breathing slows, you sense the cottage around you compact and determined. The cold presses at its edges, yet within these walls, warmth persists just enough to carry you through the night. And in this humble space where every beam and blanket serves a purpose, you drift towards sleep once more, cradled by centuries of practical wisdom shaped by winter's steady hand. The cottage fades and you find yourself climbing a narrow staircase in a growing town. The air smells faintly of smoke and something sharper, perhaps coal, beginning to edge into common use. Outside streets twist between tightly packed buildings, their upper stories leaning toward one another, as if whispering across the gap. You step into a modest urban room at the top of the house. It is smaller than the great hall of a castle, but more crowded than a rural cottage. Walls are close ceilings slightly higher, and the floor beneath you creaks with the weight of many lives layered one above another. By the late medieval and early modern periods, European towns were growing steadily. That is a widely accepted historical fact. As populations increased, housing became denser. Families rented rooms in multi-story buildings, sometimes sharing space with boarders or extended relatives. Winter in such environments carried its own peculiar challenges. You move toward the window and touch the glass. It is thin, set in small panes held by lead strips. Frost feathers outward from the edges, delicate as lace. Beyond it, narrow streets trap cold air between stone facades. Sunlight struggles to reach the lower floors during the shortest days of the year. Unlike in a rural cottage where a single hearth dominates the space, urban rooms often rely on smaller fireplaces or increasingly by the 17th and 18th centuries coal-burning grates. Coal burns hotter than wood and produces a steady heat, but it also fills the air with a different scent. A faint metallic tang lingers in the room. You crouch near the grate and feel the warmth concentrated in a tight radius. Just a few steps away, the air grows cooler. In crowded neighborhoods, smoke from neighboring chimneys drifts across rooftops, creating a hazy canopy over the city. There is an intriguing detail from certain English towns where residents complained about smoke accumulating in upper rooms during still winter nights. Chimneys could backdraft, sending soot and fumes inside. Urban winter was not simply cold, it was smoky. You glance toward the bed. It stands against an interior wall chosen carefully to avoid direct contact with the outer stone. In rented rooms, space is limited. The bed may double as seating during the day, covered with a woven blanket to disguise its purpose. Urban households sometimes included apprentices or lodgers who shared sleeping quarters. This was especially common in trade-based communities. Surviving contracts and guild records confirm that masters often provided board and lodging to young workers. Privacy was scarce. Warmth was shared. You sit on the edge of the mattress and listen to the muffled sounds of neighbors below. A door slams faintly. Footsteps echo on stairs. Someone coughs through the thin partition. The building itself seems alive with winter sound. Some historians have explored whether city dwellers experienced winter differently from rural families. Did proximity to neighbours offer psychological comfort, or did the closeness intensify stress? The evidence is mixed. Urban life provided opportunities and risks in equal measure. You pull back the blanket and notice that it smells faintly of coal smoke rather than wood. The difference is subtle but distinct. Coal's heat is more intense, yet it can dry the air more quickly. In poorly ventilated rooms, it leaves soot along window frames and mantels. A small but curious custom from certain German towns involved placing heavy curtains not only around beds but also over doorways leading to stairwells. These fabric barriers reduced drafts that travelled vertically through buildings. You slide beneath the covers and feel the mattress compress under your weight. It may be stuffed with straw or wool depending on the tenant's means. Urban life does not guarantee luxury. It often means compromise. Outside wind funnels through narrow streets, rattling shutters and carrying distant echoes. Within the room, the small fire glows steadily, but you know it will burn down by midnight unless carefully tended. In some cities, wealthier residents experimented with tiled stoves known as Kachelofen in parts of Central Europe. These ceramic structures retained heat longer than open hearths, radiating warmth gradually throughout the room. Their design marked a shift toward more efficient heating methods, though they were not universal. You imagine resting your back against such a stove, feeling its steady warmth long after flames have died. It would transform the character of winter nights. Scholars continue to discuss how urban density influenced the spread of illness during cold months, when windows were kept tightly shut and ventilation limited. The interplay between warmth and air quality shaped daily decisions. You turn onto your side and draw the blanket higher. Beneath it, warmth gathers slowly, assisted by the faint residual heat of the grate. The room may be drafty, but proximity to other heated spaces below provides some unintended benefit. Heat rises from lower floors, seeping upward. You sense the layered warmth of the building itself, imperfect but cumulative. Each family below contributes a trace of heat that drifts through beams and plaster. The city outside may be crowded and smoky, but within your small chamber, winter sleep unfolds much as it does elsewhere. Layers of fabric, careful positioning, and a watchful eye on the fire define the rhythm of the night. As you close your eyes, you hear distant church bells marking the hour. The sound travels through narrow streets and into your room, softened by curtains and stone. You settle deeper into the mattress, aware that urban winter carries its own texture. Less wind across open fields, perhaps, but more smoke, more echoes, more shared walls. And in this tightly packed world of brick and timber, you drift towards sleep, cradled by the warmth you have gathered, and the quiet hum of a city enduring winter together. The city's bells fade and the landscape widens around you. The streets disappear beneath deep snow and the horizon stretches farther than before. You stand now in Scandinavia, where winter is not merely a season, but a presence that settles in for months at a time. The daylight is brief, almost reluctant. By late afternoon, the sky has already shifted toward violet and indigo. You feel the weight of the long dark pressing gently against your thoughts. Here, sleep does not simply respond to cold, it responds to light, or rather the absence of it. In northern Europe, particularly above certain latitudes, winter days shrink dramatically. That is a well-established geographical fact. The sun arcs low across the sky and vanishes early, leaving extended hours of darkness. Families adjust their routines accordingly, rising and resting in patterns shaped by the rhythm of light. You step inside a timber house built to withstand the elements. The walls are thick, often constructed of interlocking logs carefully fitted to reduce gaps. Moss or wool might be packed between seams to block drafts. The craftsmanship reflects generations of adaptation. The hearth burns steadily, perhaps supplemented by a tiled stove that radiates warmth long after the flames subside. In parts of Sweden and Finland, such masonry stoves became common features prized for their efficiency. They absorb heat during the day and release it slowly through the night. You move closer to the stove and press your palm lightly against its surface. It feels warm, not scorching like a steady heartbeat within the house. The air around it is noticeably more comfortable than near the door. In these northern regions, bedding is layered generously. Thick wool blankets are common, as are animal furs placed atop mattresses for additional insulation. Reindeer hides in particular are valued for their dense underfur that traps air effectively. You kneel beside a bed and lift the covering slightly. The mattress may be filled with straw or wool, but above it lies a fur soft and resilient. You run your fingers along its surface and feel the warmth it promises. An interesting detail from certain Sami communities describes the use of portable sleeping skins within tents, arranged carefully around central fires. Even as lifestyles varied, the principle remained consistent. Conserve heat, stay close to its source. You slide beneath the covers and notice how quickly warmth accumulates. The room may cool overnight, but the insulation provided by layered fabrics and fur slows the loss. There is also the matter of darkness. Extended winter nights influence sleep patterns in subtle ways. Some historical accounts suggest that people in far northern regions spent longer hours in bed during the darkest months, though not necessarily asleep the entire time. The interplay between light and rest becomes more fluid. Researchers have examined whether segmented sleep was more common in such climates with periods of wakefulness woven into long stretches of night. The evidence is suggestive but incomplete. Still, you can imagine lying awake briefly listening to wind sweep across snow-laden fields before drifting back into slumber. Outside the world hushed by Ben Orris. Sound travels differently in such conditions. The wind's whisper is softened. Footsteps crunch distinctly but do not echo beyond far. Inside, the timber walls creak faintly as temperatures shift. The stove radiates its stored warmth steadily even as embers fade. A small but fascinating tradition in parts of Norway involved placing carved wooden figures near beds during winter, believed to guard sleepers from misfortune. Whether taken literally or symbolically, such customs reflect the psychological weight of long dark nights. You draw the blanket closer around your shoulders and feel the texture of wool and fur layered together. The air beneath the covers is warm, almost insulated from the chill beyond. The darkness outside feels deep, yet not oppressive. Candles flicker softly, casting gentle shadows along the log walls. The light seems more precious here, every flame valued. Some historians continue to explore how extended darkness influenced social life in Northern Europe. Did families gather more closely for storytelling and craftwork during long evenings? The written record hints at vibrant winter traditions built around shared warmth and narrative. You turn slightly and feel the mattress give beneath you. The fur above traps your body heat effectively. Even as the room cools toward dawn, your personal cocoon remains relatively stable. In this northern setting, winter sleep is shaped as much by darkness as by temperature. The two intertwine, creating a season of inward focus. You close your eyes and listen to the subtle hum of the stove, the faint crackle of wood within. Outside, snow continues to fall, quietly thickening the silence. And beneath layers of wool and fur within walls crafted to resist wind and frost, you surrender once more to the long Scandinavian night, carried gently through hours that feel both endless and profoundly still. The northern forests recede, and you find yourself higher still, where mountains rise sharply against a pale winter sky. Snow lies thick across rooftops, pressing down on wooden beams. You are in an alpine village tucked into a valley where avalanches rumble distantly and the air feels thinner, sharper. The houses here are built with intention. Stone foundations anchor them firmly, while upper levels are often timbered, projecting slightly over the lower walls. Roofs slope steeply to shed heavy snowfall. Every angle seems designed in conversation with winter. You step inside one of these mountain homes and immediately notice the scent of pine and smoke mingling in the warm air. The main room is compact though sturdy. Walls are thick, sometimes double-layered, creating a buffer against the relentless cold outside. In many alpine regions, houses incorporated living quarters and storage areas under one roof. That is a well-supported historical pattern. Haylofts above serve not only to store fodder, but also to provide insulation trapping air between the living space and the snow-laden roof. You glance upward and imagine the thick layer of hay overhead. It acts as a natural barrier, slowing the loss of warmth. The knowledge feels reassuring. The hearth burns steadily in the corner, though in some homes it may be replaced by a masonry stove built into the wall. These stoves radiate warmth slowly and consistently, ideal for nights when temperatures plunge far below freezing. You move closer and hold your hands toward the heat. The contrast between the warmth inside and the biting air beyond the door feels dramatic here. In mountain climates, winter can be severe with snowdrifts blocking paths for days. An intriguing practice in certain Swiss villages involved sealing shutters with additional wooden panels during storms. The extra layer shielded glass from icy winds and reduced drafts inside. Practical adjustments like this were routine rather than exceptional. You walk toward the sleeping area, often partitioned by a simple wooden wall or curtain. Beds are positioned carefully away from outer walls when possible. Thick wool blankets are folded neatly at the foot. You sit on the mattress and feel its firmness. Straw or wool stuffing supports you, and above it lies a heavy quilt stitched from layered fabrics. In colder households, animal pelts may be added atop the bedding, particularly during the harshest months. Outside, wind howls faintly through the valley, echoing off cliffs. The sound is distant yet persistent. Within the house, the thick walls muffle it effectively, creating a sense of sheltered calm. Some historians have explored how isolation during winter shaped alpine communities. With passes blocked and travel limited, families relied heavily on stored supplies and one another. The season fostered self-sufficiency and resilience. You slide beneath the blankets and notice how the enclosed sleeping space warms gradually. The stove's steady radiation seeps into the room, reducing the shock of cold sheets. A curious note from certain Tyrolean villages describes placing heated bricks wrapped in cloth at the foot of the bed, particularly for children. The warmth would last only a short while, but it eased the transition into sleep. You pull the quilt closer and feel its weight settle around you. The hay above and thick walls around you create a sense of protection against the mountain night. Snow continues to fall outside, softening every sound. Occasionally a distant rumble reminds you of shifting drifts high on the slopes, yet within this sturdy dwelling warmth holds steady. Researchers have considered whether mountain architecture influenced perceptions of comfort differently from lowland homes. Did the thick insulation and compact design make winter nights feel more secure? The evidence suggests that these structural choices significantly improved endurance during prolonged cold spells. You close your eyes and sense the quiet solidity of the house around you. Timber beams creak faintly as temperatures drop, but they hold firm. The bed beneath you feels stable, anchored in a space shaped deliberately to resist winter's extremes. There is a subtle confidence in these walls born of generations who learned how snow and wind behave. You turn slightly and feel the quilt adjust around your shoulders. Beneath it warmth gathers and lingers. The stove hums softly in the background, its stored heat radiating even after flames have subsided. In this alpine refuge, sleep feels almost cocooned, not immune to cold but buffered against its sharpest edges. As the night deepens and the valley grows silent under layers of snow, you drift into rest within a house built not only for beauty but for survival. And surrounded by stone, timber and hay that quietly guard against frost, you surrender to the mountain's winter embrace, steady and secure, until morning light touches the peaks once more. The mountains soften behind you, and the air grows wetter, heavier. You are now in the British Isles, where winter rarely dazzles with towering snowdrifts, but instead settles into something quieter, and in its own way more penetrating. The cold here is damp. It seeps rather than strikes. You step into a stone cottage along a windswept coast. Outside rain taps persistently against the roof, and wind pushes at the door with a steady insistence. The temperature may not plunge as low as in the Alps, yet the moisture in the air makes every degree feel sharper. The hearth burns low but steady. Turf or peat smoulders alongside wood, releasing a thick earthy scent that clings to clothing and hair. In parts of Ireland and Scotland, peat was a common fuel cut from bogs and dried carefully for winter use. That is a well-established aspect of regional life. Its slow burn provided reliable warmth in areas where large timber was scarce. You move closer to the fire and extend your hands. The warmth feels welcome, yet the air in the room remains slightly humid. Dampness lingers in corners and along window frames. Stone walls dominate many dwellings here. While sturdy, they are prone to absorbing moisture, especially during prolonged rain. You run your hand lightly along the interior surface and feel its cool solidity. An intriguing domestic practice from certain Welsh communities involved hanging small cloth sacks filled with dried herbs near beds during winter. The belief was that aromatic plants could freshen air and perhaps ward off illness in rooms that remained closed tightly against rain and wind. You sit on a wooden bench and listen to the steady rhythm of droplets outside. The sound becomes almost hypnotic. Unlike the crisp silence of snowy regions, this winter hums quietly with water. Sleeping arrangements remain much as elsewhere in Europe. Beds are layered generously with wool blankets. Linen sheets rest beneath. Curtains may enclose the frame to trap warmth. Yet the challenge here is not only cold but damp. Fabrics must be aired regularly near the hearth to prevent mildew. Blankets are rotated carefully, ensuring that moisture does not settle unnoticed. Some historians have explored how the damp climate influenced perceptions of comfort in Britain. Did the persistent wetness make winter feel more oppressive than colder, but drier conditions elsewhere? The debate continues, shaped by regional accounts and personal diaries. You kneel to adjust the bedding and notice the faint scent of peat smoke woven into the fibres. It is different from wood smoke, heavier and slightly sweet. A small but fascinating detail from certain coastal villages describes placing warmed stones inside woolen socks before slipping them into beds. The technique added a brief surge of warmth, particularly welcome on nights when rain chilled the air more than frost would have. You slide beneath the covers and feel the mattress give gently beneath your weight. Straw stuffing rustles faintly. The room remains cool beyond the immediate circle of the fire, but within your bed warmth begins to accumulate. Wind rattles the shutters softly. Unlike alpine gusts that howl dramatically, this wind murmurs, carrying hints of salt from the nearby sea. You draw the blanket up to your chin and notice how the enclosed bed creates a pocket of dry warmth despite the humidity outside. Breath warms the space gradually. Wool traps heat effectively even in slightly damp conditions, which makes it invaluable here. Researchers continue to examine how coastal weather patterns shape domestic architecture across the Isles. Thick thatched roofs and compact layouts were common responses to persistent rain and wind. You turn slightly and feel the comforting weight of layered quilts. The hearth crackles softly, and a faint glow flickers across the ceiling beams. In this damp winter landscape, sleep requires vigilance. Bedding must remain dry. Fires must be maintained carefully. Drafts must be managed without inviting moisture inside. You close your eyes and listen to the rain's steady cadence. It forms a background rhythm that feels almost soothing once you grow accustomed to it. Even here, where frost rarely paints elaborate patterns on windows, winter still demands preparation and resilience. Warmth is earned through careful fuel management and thoughtful layering. As you drift towards sleep wrapped in wool and faintly scented with peat smoke, you sense the quiet persistence of this climate. It does not roar, it seeps. And within the stone walls of this coastal cottage where rain whispers against the roof and the hearth glows faithfully, you surrender to a British winter night that feels softer in sound yet just as determined in its chill. The damp winds of the coast give way to a sharper, drier cold as you travel eastward across the continent. The landscape opens into vast plains where winter arrives with clarity and force. You are standing now on the steppes of Eastern Europe where the horizon feels endless and the air cuts cleanly against your skin. Here snow often falls in fine powdery layers that drift across open fields. The sky stretches wide above you, pale and brilliant by day stars, scattered and severe by night. The cold does not creep quietly as it did in damp regions. It declares itself plainly. You step inside a wooden izba, a traditional rural house common in parts of Russia and neighbouring lands. The structure is built from thick horizontal logs carefully notched at the corners. Gaps are sealed with moss or clay, creating surprisingly tight joints. This method of construction is well documented in regional studies of vernacular architecture. Immediately your eyes are drawn to the massive masonry stove dominating one corner of the room. Known in some areas as a Russian stove, it is large enough to lie upon. During the day it is fired intensely, absorbing heat into its thick walls. At night it releases that stored warmth, gradually transforming the interior into a more stable refuge against the deep freeze outside. You approach and press your palm lightly against its surface. The warmth feels steady and profound, radiating outward in gentle waves. Unlike an open hearth which flares and fades, this stove sustains. In especially cold climates, such heat retention systems became essential. Historical records confirm that these stoves were central to domestic life, used for cooking, heating, and even sleeping. Children sometimes napped atop the warm surface during winter afternoons. You imagine climbing onto the stove's broad ledge, feeling its comforting heat beneath you. It would feel almost luxurious compared to the biting air beyond the walls. The bed in this house is positioned strategically away from the outer wall and within reach of the stove's influence. Thick quilts are layered generously. Wool blankets and perhaps sheepskins provide additional insulation. An intriguing custom from certain Ukrainian villages involved placing small loaves of bread near the stove overnight during extreme cold. The warmth prevented them from freezing solid, ensuring food remained edible by morning. You kneel beside the bed and adjust the blankets carefully. Even with such a powerful stove, winter nights remain cold. The warmth radiates gradually, but the outer corners of the room still chill noticeably. Some historians have explored how life on the open plains influenced community cohesion during winter. Did isolation in such vast landscapes encourage tighter family bonds within the home? Evidence from diaries and oral traditions suggests a strong emphasis on shared domestic space during the coldest months. You slide beneath the covers and feel the mattress settle beneath you. Straw or wool stuffing provides modest cushioning while the thick quilt above traps heat effectively. Outside wind sweeps unhindered across the step, pressing against the log walls with steady force. The structure creaks faintly but holds firm. The careful sealing of seams proves its worth. You pull the blanket closer around your shoulders and feel the warmth from the stove reach you, subtle but persistent. It is not immediate like the blast of a modern heater. It is steady, patient. There is a quiet comfort in this consistency. The stove's heat lingers long after the flames inside have diminished. Families rely on this quality to endure nights when temperatures plummet far below freezing. Researchers continue to examine how technological variations like the masonry stove shaped regional resilience in winter climates. Compared to open hearths, these systems represented a significant advancement in domestic heating. You turn slightly and sense the air beneath the blankets growing warmer as your body heat joins the stove's radiance. Together they create a stable pocket of comfort. The night outside is vast and silent except for the wind's distant whistle. Inside, the log walls and massive stove create a feeling of enclosure almost fortress-like. You close your eyes and imagine generations who have slept in similar rooms, trusting in the slow release of heat from thick masonry to carry them through until dawn. The cold remains real beyond these walls, but here on the step, ingenuity has shaped architecture into an ally. The stove, the logs, the careful layering of bedding all combine to soften winter's severity. As you drift towards sleep, the steady warmth at your back feels reassuring. A quiet promise that even in the open expanse of Eastern Europe, winter can be endured with patience and preparation. And within this wooden house, anchored against endless snow, you surrender to rest, sheltered by thick logs and the gentle radiance of stored heat that hums softly through the night. Long before you slide beneath the blankets, there is a small ritual that feels almost ceremonial. The bed itself must be prepared, not just arranged. You stand near the hearth, watching as an iron pan with a long handle rests among the embers. Inside it, a heavy metal container warms, slowly absorbing heat from the fire. This is the bed warmer. Across much of Europe from the medieval period through the 19th century, bed warmers were common household tools. That's a clearly recorded fact in inventories and museum collections alike. Usually made of brass, copper or iron, they were filled with hot coals and then passed between the sheets to chase away the biting chill before sleep. You lift the pan carefully, feeling its weight through a thick cloth wrapped around the handle. The lid of the metal container is pierced with small holes, allowing warmth to escape without releasing embers. It looks simple, but in winter it feels almost luxurious. You carry it toward the bed and slip it between the top blankets and the linen sheet. Slowly you move it back and forth across the mattress. The cold fabric begins to yield, losing its icy edge. Steam may rise faintly where warmth meets chilled air. There is a quiet satisfaction in this preparation. Climbing into a freezing bed is never pleasant. Pre-warming it transforms the experience from shock to comfort. A small but delightful anecdote from early modern England tells of servants racing to warm their master's bed thoroughly before he retired, as a poorly heated mattress could draw sharp complaints. The quality of the warming reflected attentiveness and care. You slide the pan along the foot of the bed, ensuring that the area near your toes receives special attention. Cold feet have a way of delaying sleep more effectively than any worry. In some households, heated stones wrapped in cloth perform the same task. In parts of Germany and Austria, the ceramic foot warmers filled with hot water were also used. These variations reflect regional resourcefulness rather than uniform practice. Researchers continue to explore how such domestic tools altered perceptions of comfort during winter months. Did the ability to preheat bedding mark a shift toward more individualized attention to nighttime well-being? The question remains open, yet the presence of the warmer suggests a growing emphasis on easing discomfort. You withdraw the pan and return it carefully to the hearth, ensuring no stray ember remains. Safety matters. A careless coal could undo an entire household. Now you slip beneath the blankets and feel the difference instantly. The sheets are no longer icy. Instead, they hold a gentle warmth that greets you rather than resists you. You stretch out and let your body settle into the mattress. The initial tension that comes from bracing against cold fabric dissolves quickly. The heat will fade soon enough, but it buys you precious minutes of comfort while your own body begins generating warmth. There is a curious detail from certain French regions where decorative bed warmers were engraved with family crests or intricate patterns. Even this practical object became an opportunity for artistry. You tuck the quilt snugly around your shoulders and feel the residual warmth linger near your feet. It feels like stepping into sunlight after standing in shade. The room beyond your bed remains cool. The hearth glows faintly, but its reach is limited. Yet within your blankets, warmth gathers more quickly now thanks to that brief infusion of heat. Some historians have debated whether bed warmers were primarily used in wealthier households or more broadly across social classes. Evidence suggests they were fairly widespread, though quality and ornamentation varied significantly. You close your eyes and listen to the faint crackle of embers. Outside, wind may stir against shutters. Inside, the warmed sheets feel reassuring. The practice of heating the bed reflects an understanding of comfort that goes beyond mere survival. It acknowledges the emotional aspect of sleep. Warmth eases the transition from wakefulness to rest. You curl slightly on your side and feel the mattress cradle you. The earlier chill has retreated. In its place, there is a gentle, even warmth. In some regions, families use shared warming rituals as part of bedtime routine. Passing the warmer through multiple beds before sleep became a communal act, a small ceremony signaling the close of day. You sense how such rituals would anchor winter evenings, offering predictability amid harsh weather. The act of warming the bed becomes a quiet promise of comfort. As the heat from the warmer gradually fades, your own body takes over. Breath warms the space beneath the covers. Wool and quilt trap the accumulating warmth, and in that softened pocket of air, where heated brass has already done its part, you drift gently into sleep, grateful for the small ingenuity that turns a cold mattress into a welcoming refuge against the winter night. The warmth beneath your blankets feels steady now, but the air in the room carries another presence, one that shifts and breathes softly in the shadows. You hear a low rustle from the far corner, followed by the faint shuffle of hooves against packed earth. In many parts of Europe, especially in rural regions, livestock shared space with humans during winter. This is a well-documented feature of vernacular architecture. Cows, goats, or sheep were sometimes housed under the same roof, separated by a partition, but close enough that their body heat contributed to warming the dwelling. You lift your head slightly and listen. The sound is gentle, almost rhythmic. An animal shifts its weight. Another exhales a slow cloud of breath rising into the dim air. The arrangement may surprise modern sensibilities, but it was practical. Animals generate substantial warmth. Housing them within or adjacent to the living space created a modest but meaningful rise in temperature. You imagine the layout of such a home. On one side the hearth glows faintly. On the other a wooden barrier separates family from livestock. The animals are sheltered from the elements and their warmth seeps gradually through shared walls. In Alpine and Scandinavian regions, this integrated design was particularly common. Historical surveys of farmhouses confirm that byres were often attached directly to living quarters, creating a continuous structure that conserved heat more effectively than isolated barns. You lie back and feel the subtle warmth radiating through the floorboards beneath you. It is not dramatic, but it softens the chill that would otherwise gather near the ground. There is also the matter of sound. The presence of animals changes the acoustic texture of night. Instead of complete silence, you hear the occasional snort, the quiet shifting of straw, the steady rhythm of breathing. A small and rather charming detail from certain Swiss valleys describes farmers speaking softly to their cows before bed during winter storms, believing that calm animals contributed to a more peaceful night for everyone under the roof. You smile faintly at the thought. Whether rooted in belief or habit, the closeness between humans and animals in winter created a shared domestic world. Of course, the arrangement carried challenges. The scent of livestock mingled with smoke and wool. Cleanliness required constant attention, yet the trade-off was warmth and security. Some historians have examined how this proximity influenced rural life beyond simple practicality. Did sharing space with animals deepen a sense of interdependence between farmer and herd? The discussion remains nuanced, shaped by regional accounts and agricultural records. You adjust the quilt around your shoulders and listen again to the soft rustle beyond the partition. The animal's presence feels grounding, a reminder that survival in winter is communal not only among people but among all living beings sheltered together. In certain Eastern European homes, chickens roosted indoors during severe cold spells, tucked high along beams to protect them from frost. The house became a layered habitat, each species finding its niche. You turn slightly and sense the warmth rising subtly from below. Even a few degrees matter in a season where temperatures hover near freezing. The integration of livestock into domestic architecture reflects a practical understanding of thermal dynamics long before the science was formally articulated. Warm bodies generate heat, enclosed spaces retain it. You close your eyes and imagine the steady heartbeat of a cow just beyond the wooden wall, its breath fogging faintly in the dim light. Its presence reduces the severity of the cold for both of you. There is a quiet humility in this arrangement. No sharp line separates human comfort from animal shelter to level such distinctions. You pull the blanket closer under your chin and feel the mattress warm gradually beneath you. The faint scent of hay drifts through the air, blending with smoke from the hearth. Researchers continue to explore how architectural designs evolved in response to climate pressures. Integrated farmhouses stand as enduring examples of adaptation shaped by necessity. Outside wind brushes across the roof, but inside warmth gathers from multiple sources. Fire fabric and living bodies combine to resist the chill. You settle deeper into the mattress, aware that beneath your bed and beyond the partition life continues quietly. Each breath adds a trace of warmth to the shared air. And in this humble dwelling where humans and animals endure winter, side by side you drift towards sleep, buoyed by the steady warmth of companionship that transcends species. The night feels heavier now, not only with cold but with concern. You wake to a different sound, softer than wind and quieter than shifting hooves. It is a cough from the other side of the room, uneven and persistent. Winter has always carried illness in its shadow. In pre-modern Europe, colder months often coincided with outbreaks of respiratory infections and fevers. That is a firmly grounded historical reality reflected in parish records and personal letters alike. When people spent long hours indoors with limited ventilation, sickness could spread quickly. You sit up beneath the blankets and listen again. The cough comes once more, followed by a shallow breath. The fire has burned low and the air in the room feels cooler than before. You rise carefully, pulling your woolen wrap tighter around your shoulders. Crossing the floor sends a shiver through your legs despite thick stockings. You kneel beside the smaller bed where a child or elder lies flushed and restless. Your palm rests gently on a forehead. The skin feels warmer than it should. In winter, the line between healthy warmth and fever can blur. Without thermometers or antibiotics, families relied on observation, herbal knowledge and experience. Across Europe, home remedies varied by region. Infusions of thyme or elderflower were common in some areas, believed to ease coughs and congestion. Honey mixed with warm water soothed throats. These practices are well documented in early household manuals and folk traditions. You glance toward the hearth and consider whether to stir the embers. Warmth is comforting, but fuel must be rationed. The calculation becomes more complex when illness enters the equation. An intriguing custom from parts of rural Italy involved placing heated cloths on the chest of someone with a cough, the warmth believed to draw out the chill that caused discomfort. Whether medically effective or not, the gesture offered reassurance. You adjust the blanket around the sleeper, tucking it carefully along the sides to conserve heat. In winter, maintaining body's temperature is as important as easing symptoms. Some historians have examined how cold weather influenced mortality patterns in earlier centuries. While the causes of illness were not fully understood, communities recognized the seasonal risks and adapted as best they could. You sit quietly for a moment, listening to the uneven breathing. The rest of the household sleeps on, wrapped in layered quilts. The room feels still, almost suspended. A small detail from certain English villages reveals that families sometimes hung sprigs of rosemary near the bed of someone ill during winter. The herb's fragrance was thought to cleanse the air and protect others from contagion. You return to your own bed, but remain alert. Sleep comes lightly when illness lingers nearby. The warmth beneath your blankets feels different now, less purely comforting and more watchful. The air in the room grows cooler as the fire fades further. You weigh the need for warmth against the dwindling supply of wood. Finally, you rise once more to coax the embers back to life. The faint glow brightens and a thin flame emerges. The added warmth spreads slowly across the room, touching walls and bedding alike. The sound of crackling wood feels reassuring. Researchers continue to explore how families balance ventilation and warmth during outbreaks of illness. Opening shutters risked chilling the room, yet stale air carried its own dangers. The tension between fresh air and preserved heat was a constant negotiation. You settle again beside the ailing sleeper, listening to the rhythm of breath. The room carries the mixed scents of smoke, wool, and perhaps a hint of herbal infusion steeping near the hearth. Winter magnifies vulnerability. Without modern medicine or heating systems, comfort becomes both physical and emotional. You draw your own blanket closer, feeling the familiar accumulation of warmth beneath it. The bed feels like a refuge not only from cold but from worry. In certain regions, neighbours would visit briefly during winter illnesses, bringing broths or simple remedies despite the cold outside. Community support softened the harshness of the season. You close your eyes, but remain aware, listening for any change in breathing across the room. The fire glows faintly once more, offering a modest shield against the chill. In this quiet vigil, winter feels both intimate and formidable. It demands attention, patience, and care, and as the night continues wrapped in wool and concern alike, you hold on to warmth, not just as comfort, but as quiet protection, carrying everyone in the room gently toward the fragile promise of morning. Morning light creeps slowly across the shutters, pale and hesitant. The cough from the night before has softened, though it has not vanished entirely. You exhale quietly, relieved by even a small improvement. In winter, every sign of strength feels precious. You turn your attention now to the youngest sleepers in the room. Children lie bundled beneath layers of wool and quilt, their hair tousled against linen pillows. Their cheeks are flushed, partly from warmth, partly from the steady heat their small bodies generate beneath so many coverings. In earlier centuries, across Europe, it was entirely common for children to share sleeping spaces with parents or siblings for many years. That is well supported by household inventories and personal accounts. Separate nurseries were largely confined to wealthier families, for most winter nights meant shared rooms and shared warmth. You kneel beside a small bed or perhaps a pallet drawn close to your own. The blanket has shifted slightly in the night. You adjust it gently, tucking it along the child's shoulders. Even a small gap can allow cold air to slip in unnoticed. There is a quiet tenderness in this act. Winter amplifies care. The stakes feel higher when temperatures drop and resources are limited. In certain Scandinavian communities, parents sometimes place sheepskins directly over children's blankets during particularly severe cold spells, the dense fur trapped warmth effectively creating a snug pocket around smaller bodies. You brush a curl away from a warm forehead and feel the steady rhythm of breath. Children often sleep more deeply than adults, undisturbed by the calculations of fuel and draft that occupy older minds. A curious detail from parts of rural France describes mothers warming a small cloth near the fire and pressing it gently against a child's feet before tucking them in, ensuring that no chill lingered as they drifted into sleep. You rise and move quietly toward the hearth. The embers from the night before have dimmed but not disappeared. You add kindling carefully, mindful not to wake the entire household too abruptly. The room begins to brighten faintly as the fire revives. Light flickers along beams and across sleeping forms. Winter mornings are unhurried here. No central heating hums to ease the transition from bed to day. Warmth must be coaxed back into existence. Researchers have examined how childhood experiences of winter-shaped memory and tradition. Did stories told around the hearth linger longer in minds formed during long nights? The question remains open, yet the atmosphere of closeness and routine surely left its mark. You return to the bedside and sit for a moment listening to the faint crackle of wood. The fire's renewed warmth spreads, gradually softening the room's edges. In some regions of Eastern Europe, children were taught simple tasks related to winter survival at an early age, such as gathering kindling or helping to fluff bedding. Participation reinforced the communal nature of warmth. You smile faintly at the thought of small hands carefully arranging blankets, mimicking adult gestures with solemn seriousness. The room feels calmer now. The earlier cough has faded into a quiet murmur of breath. Outside, frost still clings to window edges and the landscape beyond remains stark. You tuck the blanket once more around the smallest sleeper and feel the reassuring weight settle evenly. Beneath layers of wool and linen, warmth holds steady. In a world without thermostats or electric blankets, the well-being of children depends on vigilance, layering and proximity. It is a hands-on practice guided by observation rather than instruments. You draw your own shawl tighter around your shoulders and sit near the hearth as the day begins to unfold. The fire grows brighter, casting a gentle glow that reaches even the far corner of the room. Children stir gradually, blinking against the light. Their first movements are slow, unhurried. They sense the warmth returning before they fully wake. You watch them stretch and burrow deeper into blankets, savouring the last moments of sleep. Winter mornings feel softer when warmth spreads gently rather than abruptly. Some historians have suggested that shared sleeping arrangements fostered a strong sense of security in childhood, especially during harsh seasons. The closeness of family provided reassurance against the cold and the dark. You stand and add another log to the hearth. The day's tasks will soon begin, yet for now the room remains wrapped in quiet warmth. As the children sit up and rub their eyes, you notice how the careful layering of bedding has preserved comfort through the coldest hours. No frostbitten fingers, no chilled cheeks, kicks. In this modest space, warmth is measured not only in degrees but in gestures. A blanket adjusted, a fire revived, a small cloth warmed for cold feet. And as the household fully awakens, you carry forward the quiet knowledge that winter sleep, especially for the youngest among you, is safeguarded by patience, preparation, and a steady watch through the night. Even in the deepest stretch of winter, when frost rims the windows and the fire is guarded like treasure, life does not pause entirely. You notice it in the way the room is arranged tonight. The benches are drawn a little closer to the hearth. The table has been cleared with unusual care. There is a subtle anticipation in the air. Courtship does not disappear in cold weather. It simply adapts. You sit near the fire, aware that someone from another household may arrive soon, boots dusted with snow breath visible in the dark. In many parts of Europe before the 19th century, romantic meetings rarely unfolded in private spaces. That is a well-attested social pattern. Young people often courted under the watchful presence of family members, especially during winters when evenings were longed and indoor gatherings common. A knock comes at the door, soft but deliberate. The wind slips in briefly as it opens, followed by a figure wrapped in wool and carrying the faint scent of the night air. He removes his cap, respectfully stepping inside the circle of warmth. The hearth glows brighter as another log is added. Heat becomes part of the ritual. Conversations begin with safe topics. The weather, the harvest stored away, the condition of livestock. Yet beneath these exchanges runs a quiet current of possibility. You remain seated, hands folded loosely in your lap, aware of the eyes in the room. Privacy is scarce, but so is isolation. Winter compresses social life inward, turning homes into gathering spaces. An intriguing custom from parts of Scandinavia involved supervised evening visits known as night courting, where a young suitor might sit beside a woman under the watch of her family, sometimes even sharing a bench or blanket near the fire while conversation flowed. Boundaries were understood, and warmth was shared within carefully defined limits. You glance toward this bed in the corner here, its curtains drawn back for now. It stands as both a practical object and a silent reminder of the domestic life that might one day follow. Some historians have examined how winter gatherings shaped romantic customs. Did the long evenings by the hearth encourage storytelling and intimacy in ways that summer's outdoor labour did not? The evidence suggests that cold seasons fostered indoor sociability. The visitor shifts slightly closer to the fire, extending his hands toward the warmth. You notice how the glow catches the edges of his woolen sleeves. The room feels fuller, brighter. In certain rural regions of Germany, families allowed prospective couples to sit together on a bench known as a courting seat positioned near the hearth. The arrangement balanced proximity with supervision, warmth with modesty. You sense the delicate balance in this room tonight. Laughter flickers lightly, as quick and bright as the flames. A parent's glance serves as both permission and reminder. The air grows warmer as more bodies gather within the small space. The combined heat of several people enhances the hearth's effect, and even the walls seem to hold warmth more effectively. You pull your shawl closer around your shoulders, aware of the subtle closeness between you and the visitor. The bench is narrow by design, elbows brush lightly. Winter courtship is less about grand gestures and more about shared endurance. Walking home through snow after such an evening requires determination. The effort itself signals sincerity. A small but charming anecdote from certain French villages recounts young couples carving initials discreetly into the wooden beam above the hearth during winter gatherings, leaving quiet marks of attachment that lasted long after the season passed. The conversation deepens gradually. Stories are exchanged, memories recalled. Outside, the wind continues its steady murmur, but inside, warmth and light create a different atmosphere. Researchers continue to explore how domestic architecture influenced social interaction. Compact rooms around a central fire naturally encouraged proximity, shaping the rhythms of courtship and conversation. You glance again at the bed, its blankets neatly arranged. It represents a future shaped by shared warmth and responsibility. For now, it remains simply part of the room's landscape. As the evening draws toward its close, the visitor stands reluctantly. Caps and cloaks are reclaimed. The door opens briefly, releasing a swirl of cold air before shutting firmly again. Silence settles, gradually broken only by the crackle of wood in the hearth. The warmth lingers where bodies had gathered moments before. You sit quietly reflecting on how winter nights carry not only cold but connection. The same fire that guards against frost also illuminates faces and fosters conversation. When you finally draw the bed curtains closed and slip beneath the blankets, the memory of shared warmth remains. It mingles with the heat trapped under wool and linen. Outside, snow may continue to fall. Inside, the promise of companionship softens the chill. And as you drift into sleep, you sense that even in a season defined by endurance, warmth finds ways to gather around both hearth and heart alike. The house is quiet again, yet winter nights have a way of sharpening the imagination. You lie beneath your blankets, the last of the fire dimming to a low red pulse, and the wind begins to move differently. It no longer murmurs. It sighs. It presses against the walls with uneven breath. In the darkness, the sound expands. A shutter rattles once, then settles. The roof beams creak faintly as the air cools further. You know these noises. You have heard them every winter, and yet when you are half awake and wrapped in shadow, they feel unfamiliar. Across Europe, long winter nights nurtured rich traditions of folklore. That is a well-documented cultural reality. In villages where artificial light was scarce and darkness stretched for hours, stories filled the space that silence left behind. Tales of spirits, wandering lights, and creatures that roamed the cold became part of seasonal rhythm. You pull the quilt slightly closer to your chin and listen. Somewhere in the room, a log shifts in the hearth, releasing a faint crack. It sounds almost like a footstep. In parts of Germany and Austria, winter evenings were associated with stories of the wild hunt, a spectral procession said to sweep through the sky during the darkest nights. Whether taken literally or as metaphor, such tales carried weight when wind howled across rooftops. You close your eyes and remind yourself that the sounds are ordinary. Timber contracts in cold, stone settles, wind searches for edges, still the mind wanders. A small but intriguing detail from certain Scandinavian traditions describes families placing a small offering of bread near the hearth during midwinter. meant to appease unseen spirits and ensure peace through the season. The act may have been symbolic, yet it reveals how closely warmth and belief were intertwined. You turn onto your side and feel the mattress rustle beneath you. The room beyond the bed curtains feels vast, though you know it is only a few paces wide. Darkness has a way of stretching space. Researchers have long explored how seasonal isolation shaped folklore in colder climates. Did extended indoor confinement encourage storytelling as a form of psychological warmth? The evidence suggests that winter narratives served both entertainment and reassurance. You listen again. The wind subsides briefly, leaving a deeper silence in its wake. In that stillness you hear the slow breathing of others in the room. The familiar rhythm grounds you. Some regions of Eastern Europe associated certain winter nights with heightened spiritual activity, blending Christian feast days with older pagan customs. Candles were lit not only for light but for comfort against imagined presences in the dark. You glance toward the faint outline of the hearth. Its glow is almost gone now, only a dim shimmer remains. You consider rising to feed it, but decide the warmth beneath your blankets is sufficient. There is something intimate about these moments between sleep and wakefulness. The mind drifts through memory and myth, while the body remains cocooned in wool. You recall how elders once told stories by the fire, their voices low and steady. Wolves in distant forests, travellers lost in snow, kindly spirits guiding wanderers home. Each tale carried both caution and comfort. Some historians continue to examine how winter folklore reinforced communal bonds and moral lessons. In a season when survival required cooperation, stories often emphasize generosity and vigilance. The house creaks again and you feel a brief flutter of unease. Then you recognize the sound. A beam adjusting as temperature drops. You exhale slowly and let your breathing deepen. The bed curtains, the layered blankets, the shared warmth all form a barrier not only against cold but against fear. Outside, frost spreads as quietly across fields and rooftops. Inside the room, hold steady, anchored by walls and memories alike. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the fragile warmth gathered beneath the covers. The earlier tension fades, replaced by a gentle heaviness behind your eyes. Winter nights may be long and dark, but they are not empty. They are filled with sound, with stories, with the steady presence of others nearby. You let the wind's murmur blend into the background, no longer a threat, but part of the season's voice. And as sleep draws you inward once more, you sense that even the oldest tales, whispered in the cold, carry a thread of reassurance. The house stands. The fire smoulders faintly, the blankets hold. Within this small circle of warmth, winter's shadows lose their sharpest edges, and you drift deeper into rest, cradled by the quiet companionship of story and shelter alike. By late winter, you have learned to count wood the way others might count coins. Each log stacked against the wall represents a future night of guarded warmth. Each bundle of peat or faggot of twigs carries you one step closer to spring. You stand near the hearth in the fading light and study the remaining pile. It is smaller than it was in autumn. That much is undeniable. In many parts of Europe before industrial scale, fuel distribution families gathered and stored firewood months in advance. This is well attested in agricultural calendars and estate records. A miscalculation in autumn could mean genuine hardship by February. You lift a log and weigh it in your hands. It feels heavier than you expect, dense with stored energy, yet you hesitate before placing it on the fire. The night ahead may be long, but so may the season. Fuel scarcity was not uncommon. In regions where forests were heavily managed or depleted, access to wood could be restricted. Peat cutting rights were often regulated by local custom. Winter warmth depended not only on preparation, but on social agreements. You kneel? And add a smaller piece to the embers, instead coaxing flame without committing too much of your supply. The fire responds slowly, licking upward with cautious brightness. There is a quiet discipline to this practice. Fires are banked early in the evening, then allowed to dwindle gradually. Only when cold sharpens uncomfortably do you feed them again. An intriguing custom from certain English villages describes neighbours sharing wood in especially harsh winters, lending small bundles with the expectation of repayment in spring. Community networks sometimes soften the edge of scarcity. You settle back and extend your hands toward the modest flame. The warmth is limited but sufficient. You know that burning fuel recklessly early in the night will leave you colder before dawn. Some historians have explored how fuel shortages shaped social unrest in certain periods, particularly when rising populations increased demand for wood. Debates over access to common lands often intensified during colder decades. You glance toward the bed where blankets lie ready. Tonight you may rely more heavily on layered wool than on roaring flames. The arithmetic of winter demands flexibility. In certain alpine communities, families were known to reduce fire use deliberately during clear but frigid nights, trusting thick insulation and shared body heat to compensate. The practice required confidence in bedding and architecture alike. You rise and move closer to the woodpile again, counting silently. One log for early evening, perhaps another before midnight, none if the temperature remains steady. The air in the room cools gradually as the small piece of wood burns down. Shadows lengthen along the walls. You feel the faint draft near the door and adjust a rolled cloth along its base to block the gap. Researchers continue to examine how climate fluctuations such as colder phases during the Little Ice Age strained fuel supplies across Europe. Households adapted through conservation and innovation. You draw your shawl tighter and sit near the hearth, watching as embers glow faintly. There is a peculiar intimacy in this rationing. You are in conversation with the fire, negotiating its lifespan against the night's demands. A small but fascinating detail from certain Dutch towns recounts families storing dried dung cakes alongside wood during lean years, ensuring that even when timber ran low, some form of fuel remained available. You imagine the careful stacking of such materials in autumn, each piece representing foresight and effort. As bedtime approaches, you allow the fire to settle rather than blaze. The room grows cooler but not unmanageable. Blankets will carry the rest. You slip beneath the covers and feel the familiar layering of warmth begin again. Your own body becomes the primary source of heat, now supplemented only lightly by the dying embers. Outside wind moves gently across rooftops. Inside the room contracts around the bed, the hearth, the small circle of remaining fuel. Some scholars have considered how these nightly calculations shaped attitudes toward comfort in later centuries. When warmth required vigilance, perhaps people valued it more deeply once mechanical systems simplified the process. You close your eyes and listen to the faint crackle of the last embers. The decision to conserve feels prudent rather than restrictive. The blankets hold, your breath warms the air beneath them. The night unfolds slowly, and as you drift towards sleep, aware of the dwindling woodpile and the long season still ahead, you sense the quiet resilience embedded in this careful stewardship of fire. Each log saved tonight is a promise carried forward to another dawn. Winter does not remain static across centuries. You begin to notice small changes in the houses around you, subtle adjustments that alter how warmth is kept inside. The rooms feel slightly brighter. The windows, though still modest, appear clearer and more deliberate in their construction. Glass has been part of European architecture for many centuries, yet its widespread use in ordinary homes expanded gradually over time. That is a well-established historical development. Earlier windows were often small and covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. As glass production improved and became more accessible, panes grew more common even in modest dwellings. You stand before a window framed with multiple small panes set in lead. Frost etches delicate patterns along the edges, but the centre remains clear enough to glimpse the snowy yard beyond. The glass admits precious daylight during winter's brief hours, reducing reliance on candles and fire for illumination. Yet glass alone does not guarantee warmth. Early panes were thin, prone to drafts along their edges. You run your fingers lightly along the frame and feel a faint chill where cold seeps inward. Households adapted creatively. Thick curtains were hung not merely for privacy but to retain heat after sunset. In some regions, shutters were reinforced with additional panels during winter months, creating a layered barrier against wind. An interesting domestic detail from 17th century England describes families sewing padded window covers that could be tied in place at night, effectively insulating the glass from within. Such small innovations signaled a growing awareness of thermal management. You step back and look around the room. The walls may now be plastered more smoothly, reducing gaps that once allowed drafts to wander freely. Chimneys have evolved, improving smoke ventilation and allowing fireplaces to burn more efficiently. Some historians have examined how these incremental improvements in building materials influenced winter comfort long before central heating emerged. The consensus suggests that gradual refinements in insulation and design, softened though, did not eliminate the challenges of cold seasons. You kneel near the hearth and notice how its structure differs slightly from earlier examples. The firebox may be smaller but better shaped to reflect heat into the room rather than letting it escape upward. Firebacks made of cast iron appear in certain households, positioned behind flames to radiate warmth more effectively. You imagine the satisfaction of discovering that a room retains warmth longer than it once did, even if only by a few degrees. Each small advancement matters. In parts of the Low Countries, double windows known as storm windows were occasionally installed during winter to create an insulating air pocket between panes. Though not universal, such experiments hint at evolving strategies. You return to the bed and observe how it too benefits from these changes. Fewer drafts mean blankets retain warmth more easily. The air beneath the covers feels more stable. A curious note from certain French estates recounts the introduction of wall panelling in bedchambers, not solely for decoration, but to reduce direct contact between sleepers and cold stone surfaces. You draw the curtain around the bed and feel the difference immediately. The space warms more quickly now, aided by improved windows and tighter walls. Researchers continue to explore how architectural evolution laid the groundwork for later heating technologies. The transition from open hearths to enclosed fireplaces and stoves represents a continuum rather than a sudden leap. You sit quietly and listen. The room feels calmer, less susceptible to sudden gusts of wind. The fire burns steadily without sending smoke back into the chamber. Outside frost gathers on rooftops, but inside warmth lingers a little longer than it might have centuries earlier. You slip beneath the blankets and notice how quickly your breath warms the enclosed space. The improved window seals and thicker curtains make a subtle but meaningful difference. Even so, winter retains its authority. You still rely on layers of wool and careful fuel management, yet the edge feels slightly blunted. Some scholars have pondered whether these modest architectural improvements altered people's expectations of comfort. When homes grew incrementally warmer, did patience with cold diminish? The question invites reflection. You close your eyes and feel the room's steadier warmth cradle you. No single innovation transforms the experience entirely. Instead, progress arrives quietly, pane by pane, panel by panel. And as sleep draws near, you sense that the story of winter rest is shifting, gradually shaped by human ingenuity that builds layer upon layer, holding back the cold with ever greater confidence. Sometime before dawn, you wake to a strange shimmer on the wall opposite your bed. For a moment, you think it is moonlight. Then you focus more clearly and see delicate white patterns spreading across the plaster like fern leaves drawn in chalk. It is frost inside. You lift your hand from beneath the blanket and feel the air beyond your warm cocoon. It bites instantly. The fire has gone completely dark and the room has surrendered to the coldest hour of the night. In earlier centuries, especially during severe winters, interior frost was not unheard of in poorly insulated dwellings. Contemporary diaries and letters describe water basins frozen solid indoors and ice forming along walls. That is a documented reality from colder periods in European climate history. You remain still for a moment, watching your breath cloud faintly above the quilt. The air is so cold that even the moisture from your lungs crystallizes against nearby surfaces. The window is etched completely now, the glass transformed into a canvas of ice. Tiny branching structures radiate outward from the corners, intricate and fragile. They will vanish once the fire is lit again, but for now they dominate the room's quiet landscape. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders and feel the precious pocket of warmth you have created through the night. Beneath the quilt, the temperature remains tolerable. Beyond it, winter has crept inward boldly. In certain Scandinavian households during particularly harsh spells, families were known to hang additional fabric along interior walls when frost began to appear, creating a makeshift barrier between sleepers and icy surfaces. You consider rising to rekindle the fire, but you hesitate. The woodpile is not infinite and dawn is not far off. If you can endure a little longer beneath your covers, the chill will be manageable. Some historians have examined how episodes of extreme cold during the Little Ice Age influenced domestic architecture and daily routines. Periods of sustained frost forced communities to refine insulation methods and fuel storage practices. You shift slightly, careful not to let too much cold air seep under the blanket. Even a brief exposure sends a sharp chill along your arms. There is a curious account from 17th century France describing a noblewoman waking to find her bed curtains stiff with frost where her breath had condensed overnight. The image feels almost surreal yet plausible in rooms without consistent heat. You glance toward the hearth. The ashes lie pale and still. You know that once you rise and coax the embers back to life, the frost will retreat, melting into small droplets that run down plaster and glass. For now, however, the room belongs to winter. Researchers continue to explore how indoor frost episodes reveal the limits of pre-modern heating systems. Even the most careful layering of the fabric and strategic placement of beds could not entirely prevent the coldest air from seeping in. You press your feet together beneath the quilt, sharing warmth between them. Your hands tuck beneath your arms. The position becomes compact, conserving every degree. Outside, the world is gaunt under a pale sky that has yet to brighten. Inside, the frost patterns glimmer faintly in the dim light. There is something strangely beautiful about this moment. The cold is formidable, yet it paints the room with delicate artistry. You breathe slowly, feeling the warmth accumulate again beneath the covers. Your body remains a steady source of heat even as the room hovers near freezing. In certain alpine villages, people spoke of winter mornings, when the air inside felt as crisp as outdoors, Yet families endured by rising quickly and setting the fire before any prolonged exposure could take its toll. You know that soon you will do the same. For now you remain still cocooned within layers of wool and linen that have preserved your comfort through the coldest stretch of night. The frost holds its ground briefly, then begins to fade as the faintest light touches the horizon. Dawn approaches, bringing with it the promise of rekindled flame. You sit up at last and swing your legs cautiously over the edge of the inn. The floor is shockingly cold beneath your stockings, but you move with purpose toward the hearth. A spark catches, kindling crackles softly. Slowly warmth returns to the room. The frost along the wall begins to melt droplets, tracing small paths downward. The window clears at its centre. Winter has shown its strength, yet you have endured. And as the fire grows brighter and the room gradually softens, you sense once more the quiet resilience that carries you through even the coldest dawn. You are no longer in your own bed tonight. The rhythm feels different immediately. The walls are unfamiliar, the air carries scents that do not belong to you, and the fat mattress beneath your back has the uncertain give of something well used by many others. You've arrived at a winter inn. Outside, snow lies in uneven ridges along the roadside. Your journey has been slow and deliberate, boots crunching across frozen ground. The sky darkened early, and the promise of a roof, however modest, felt like relief. In early modern Europe, travel during winter did not cease entirely, though it was often slower and riskier. That is clearly supported by records of merchants, pilgrims, and officials who moved between towns even in cold months. Inns provided shelter, food, and a measure of warmth, though comfort varied widely. You step into the common room and are greeted by a rush of heat from a central fire. It feels almost overwhelming after hours in open air. Travellers cluster around the hearth, their cloaks steaming faintly as snow melts from wool. The innkeeper gestures toward a bench and you take a seat near the blaze. The warmth stings your cheeks at first, then soothes. The room hums with low conversation. Stories of road conditions, frozen rivers, and distant markets weave through the smoky air. An interesting custom in certain alpine passes involved communal sleeping arrangements in winter inns, where multiple travellers shared a single large bed to conserve heat. Privacy was secondary to practicality. As night deepens, you are shown to the sleeping quarters. They are simple. Rows of beds line the walls, some separated by thin curtains, others open to view. The air is warmer than outdoors, but cooler than you might hope. You set down your small bundle and examine the mattress. It is stuffed with straw, perhaps less frequently changed than in a private home. The scent is faintly musty, mingled with smoke and the lingering trace of many sleepers. Some historians have explored how inns balance hospitality with limited resources during winter. Firewood had to be rationed carefully when accommodating numerous guests. You pull back the blanket and test its weight. It is thick but worn-patched in places. You suspect many nights of use have shaped its texture. A curious anecdote from 17th century England recounts travellers joking about the lively company of fleas in certain roadside inns. Though perhaps exaggerated, it reflects the realities of shared lodging. You remove your outer garments and slip beneath the covers, keeping your woolen cap firmly in place. The sheets are cool at first, but not unbearably so. Across the room, another traveller coughs lightly. Someone shifts on a creaking frame. The soundscape is richer than at home, layered with unfamiliar breathing and murmured dreams. The fire in the common room has been banked carefully for the night. Its warmth seeps faintly through the thin walls, offering modest relief. Researchers continue to examine how winter travel influenced trade and communication across Europe. Despite harsh conditions, movement persisted, sustained by networks of inns and hostels. You turn onto your side and feel the mattress rustle beneath you. It is not the bed you know, not the carefully tended refuge of your own hearth, yet it offers shelter from the freezing air outside. The walls of the inn creak faintly as wind brushes against them. Snow slides from the roof with a soft thud. You pull the blanket closer, mindful that you share this space with strangers whose warmth contributes subtly to the room's temperature. Body heat accumulates in shared quarters just as in family homes. In certain regions of Germany, inns maintained large tiled stoves and sleeping chambers, during severe winters improving comfort significantly. Such features varied by location and wealth. You close your eyes and allow the unfamiliar sounds to settle into rhythm. The inn is not stolent, but it is secure. Outside the road lies buried beneath frost. Inside, travellers from different villages rest side by side, united by the need for warmth and shelter. The mattress or it is such as beneath you may not be perfect and miraculous. The blanket may carry the scent of many winters past. Yet it shields you from the cold wind beyond these walls, and as the murmurs of the room fade into steady breathing, you drift into sleep within this temporary refuge, trusting that even far from home winter nights can be endured beneath shared roofs and shared warmth. The inn fades into memory, and you find yourself back in a familiar domestic room, though something subtle has shifted. The air smells different tonight. There is a sharper edge beneath the smoke, a faint mineral tang that lingers in your throat. Coal. By the 17th and 18th centuries, coal had become an increasingly important fuel source in parts of Europe, particularly in Britain. That is a thoroughly documented historical development tied to industrial expansion and urban growth. Where woodlands thinned and cities swelled, coal offered an alternative that burned hotter and in many cases longer. You stand before a small grate set into the hearth, watching as black lumps glow red at their core. The flames are less lively than wood, but the heat they release is heady and intense. Coal changes the character of winter warmth. It requires different tools, different grates, different habits. You notice how the room warms more quickly near the fire, yet the air feels drier. In certain English towns, households gradually shifted from open wood fires to coal-burning grates, altering both architecture and domestic routine. Chimneys were modified to handle increased smoke and soot. You extend your hands toward the fire and feel its concentrated strength. The heat seems more focused, less radiant than a broad wood flame. A small and rather telling detail from 18th century London describes complaints about coal smoke blackening curtains and ceilings. Comfort came at a cost. The city air grew heavier as more homes adopted the new fuel. You step back and glance toward the window. The glass carries a faint smudge of soot at its edges, a subtle reminder of change. Some historians have explored whether the adoption of coal influenced perceptions of winter comfort in meaningful ways. Did hotter fires encourage expectations of warmer rooms? The question invites careful consideration. You kneel to adjust the grate, noticing how the embers settle differently from wood. Coal requires tending to maintain airflow. It is less forgiving if neglected. In parts of Belgium and northern France, coal deposits fueled similar transitions, especially in mining regions where access was easier. You return to the bed and consider how this stronger heat affects your preparation for sleep. The room may remain warmer later into the night, reducing the urgency of heavy layering. Yet the old habits persist. You still draw thick blankets close, you still wear your nightcap. Coal has improved the situation, but it has not transformed it entirely. A curious anecdote from early industrial towns recounts families warming bricks atop coal fires before wrapping them into the cloth for use at the foot of beds. The practice bridged old and new technologies. You slip beneath the covers and feel the mattress compress gently beneath you. The air beneath the blanket warms quickly, aided by residual heat from the grate. Researchers continue to examine how the rise of coal reshaped domestic life long before the arrival of central heating systems. The shift altered not only warmth, but also urban landscapes and labour patterns. You lie on your side and sense the room holding heat more steadily than before. The cold edges are softer tonight. Outside, the sky hangs low and grey, reflecting the faint haze of smoke that now drifts above town and cities. Within your room, the coal fire glows quietly, its embers pulsing with stored energy. You consider how energy sources influence architecture, social habits, even sleep itself. Each innovation builds upon centuries of adaptation. As you close your eyes, the faint scent of coal lingers in the air. It feels both modern and elemental, a new chapter in the long story of winter endurance. And beneath layered wool and linen, in a room warmed by black stone drawn from deep earth, you drift towards sleep, aware that change has arrived, quietly glowing red within the grate. You sense that something is shifting again, not abruptly, but with the quiet confidence of experiment. The hearth is no longer the only focal point in the room. Against one wall stands a cast iron stove, compact and self-contained, its surface smooth and dark, faintly warm to the touch. You approach it with curiosity. Unlike an open fireplace, this stove encloses the flame completely. A small door allows fuel to be added, and narrow vents regulate airflow. The heat it releases feels more controlled, less erratic. By the 18th and 19th centuries, various forms of enclosed stoves began appearing across Europe, particularly in urban and wealthier rural homes. This is well documented in architectural records and surviving examples. Inventors and craftsmen sought ways to increase efficiency, capturing more heat and wasting less up the chimney. You run your hand a cautious distance from its side and feel steady warmth radiating outward. The air in the room seems more evenly tempered, not concentrated in a single corner. In certain German regions, ceramic tile stoves had long served a similar purpose, but cast iron versions began to spread more widely as metalworking advanced. Their surfaces absorbed heat and released it, gradually smoothing the sharp peaks and troughs of open flames. A small but intriguing detail from 19th century Scandinavia describes families placing a kettle atop such stoves to humidify the air during winter, counteracting the dryness produced by enclosed heating. You glance toward the ceiling. Smoke no longer curls freely through the room. The chimney draws more efficiently, the air feels clearer. Some historians have explored whether these early heating innovations altered daily routines in subtle ways. Did more stable warmth encourage families to spend longer hours awake in winter evenings? The evidence suggests that as heat became more manageable, social habits adapted. You move to the bed and notice how the room retains warmth even as the fire within the stove dims. The temperature drop is slower, gentler. The mattress feels familiar beneath your hand, still stuffed with straw or wool. Blankets remain layered carefully, yet the urgency to trap every ounce of heat feels slightly reduced. In parts of France and Austria, early experiments with hot air channels were attempted within large estates, guiding warmth from one room to another. These systems were rare and imperfect, but they hinted at future possibilities. You slip beneath the covers and feel the air already warmer than it would have been in earlier centuries. The stove's steady radiation has softened the room's chill. A curious anecdote from Victorian England recounts households debating the placement of stoves to maximise comfort without overcrowding small rooms. The question of where to position warmth became a topic of lively discussion. You turn slightly and sense that the blanket traps heat quickly now. The combination of improved stove design and careful insulation creates a more reliable refuge. Researchers continue to examine how these incremental technologies pave the way for later, centralized systems. Each refinement addressed a specific weakness of earlier methods. Outside, frost still gathers along rooftops, but inside the air feels more balanced. The cold no longer surges inward as dramatically when the fire wanes. You close your eyes and listen to the faint ticking sound of metal cooling gradually. It replaces the crackle of open flame with a softer rhythm. The room's warmth lingers long after you have settled into bed. It feels less precarious, less dependent on constant tending. Yet habits endure. You still pull the quilt to your chin. You still tuck your hands beneath your arms for added warmth. The stove hums faintly in the background, a quiet sign of progress. As sleep approaches, you sense that winter's dominance has been challenged not by sudden transformation, but by thoughtful design and experimentation. And in this room where iron holds and releases heat with patient consistency, you drift toward rest, aware that the story of winter sleep is evolving steadily, carrying you closer to a future where warmth may flow more freely than ever before. You lie in a room that feels subtly different from all the others you have known on this long winter journey. The air is warm, not in a sharp circle near a fire, not in cautious pockets beneath curtains, but everywhere. It wraps around you evenly, almost invisibly. There is no open flame in sight, no soot smudges the walls, no frantic calculation of logs before midnight. Instead, somewhere beyond the plaster pipes hum faintly, carrying warmth from a central source. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, forms of central heating began to appear more widely in Europe, especially in urban buildings and affluent homes. This is thoroughly documented in architectural history. Hot water and steam systems gradually replaced reliance on single hearths or stoves distributing heat through radiators placed in multiple rooms. You reach out from beneath your blanket and feel the air without hesitation. It is steady, forgiving. You do not brace yourself for a shock of cold. The bed itself still holds familiar layers of linen and wool, but they feel less like armor and more like comfort. The room's temperature remains stable even as night deepens. You sit up and glance toward the radiator along the wall. It stands quietly, a simple metal form that radiates warmth without drama. It is easy to forget how revolutionary this would have seemed to earlier generations. No more rising before dawn to coax embers back to life. No more frost creeping along interior walls. No more heated bricks carried carefully between sheets. An intriguing anecdote from early 20th century Paris describes residents marveling at apartments where heat flowed through pipes from a shared boiler, remarking on the novelty of rooms that stayed warm without constant tending. You slip back beneath the covers and close your eyes. The silence feels different. There is no crackle of wood, no hiss of coal, only the faint murmur of circulating warmth. Some historians have considered how central heating reshaped domestic life beyond simple comfort. Did the disappearance of the hearth as focal point alter family dynamics? The discussion continues, exploring the cultural impact of technological change. You think back to the curtained beds, the straw mattresses, the careful layering of quilts. You remember frost blooming on walls, wind pressing against shutters, animals breathing softly beyond partitions. All of it shaped how families slept through harsh winters, each solution born of necessity, refined through generations. Now warmth arrives without visible effort. It flows unseen through walls and floors, indifferent to drafts or dwindling wood piles. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket and feel no urgent need to curl tightly. The room supports you gently. The journey from hearth to radiator has been gradual, marked by small experiments and incremental refinements. Yet as you settle into this evenly warmed space, you sense that something intangible has shifted. The vigilance that once accompanied winter nights has softened. The relationship between body and cold has changed. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow. The memory of older winters lingers faintly like smoke woven into wool. And now, as promised, we ease into a final quiet moment together. The air around you is calm and steady. There is no wind pushing at shutters, no frost tracing silent patterns along stone. Instead, warmth rests lightly against your skin, constant and unhurried. You imagine the generations before you, curled beneath heavy quilts rising in darkness to tend fires, measuring fuel carefully against the length of the night. Their patience and ingenuity carried them through seasons that tested endurance. You feel gratitude for their quiet resilience. The room is still, the warmth hums softly, almost imperceptibly. Your shoulders sink deeper into the mattress. Your breath grows slower, gentler. Winter remains outside, but it no longer demands constant negotiation. You're safe, you are warm, and as the memory of crackling hearths and frost-lined walls fades into a soft blur, you drift into sleep wrapped in the comfort of centuries of adaptation. Sweet dream to